Disclaimer. The following content may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. My name is Aizawa, and I was bullied in school. I was standing against the wall without my clothes behind the school as a tennis ball came hurtling towards me and hit my chest. I was black and blue all over. Just then, one of my bullies says, 80 points for Akun, as another boy says, laughing, where's the control? And you call yourself a baseball club member? Another bully says, hey, Aizawa, can't you look like you're having fun? You're making it look like we're bullying you. Smile, smile. Again, the first bully says, all right, 100 points. The boy who laughed says, let's go for another round. It was the end of May, 2021. The ballroom was bustling as one lady says, smiling to another, hey, are you Megumi? Megumi smiles and says, wow, it's been a while. The first one says, you haven't changed at all. As Megumi says, ha ha ha, no, I've gotten old. I'm already 35, you know? Just then, the first one says, looking over her shoulder, hey, look over there. That's Satake-san. Seeing her, Megumi says, oh, that plain girl? There are more guys around her than there ever were back in the day. The first one says, but she definitely had plastic surgery, right? Look at the bridge of the nose. Just then, a boy sees Suzuki coming along and says, oh, Suzuki, what's with the late arrival? You trying to play cool? Suzuki says, smiling, it's not like that, man. Just then, the first lady sees him saying, it's Suzuki, with Megumi watching him. Seeing the ladies, Suzuki walks over. Hey, it's been a while? The first one says, smiling. Suzuki-kun, I'm glad you made it. I thought you wouldn't come. Suzuki says, smiling, no, I'd come. I organized this after all. The first one says, I decided to help coordinate too, but I was worried if we'd be able to get everybody after 20 years. Suzuki says, that's true. Just then, the door opens and another student enters as someone says, but it seems a lot of Class 3-2 showed up. Suzuki says, yeah. The first one says, well, even before. Class 3-2 was a class with strong bonds after all. As Suzuki walks away, the first one says, Suzuki-kun is as cool as ever, huh? Megumi says, apparently he's an elite who works for a bank now. Rumor is his yearly salary is over $100,000. The first one says, what? That's crazy. My husband is a civil servant and only gets around half of that. I'm jealous of his wife. Megumi says, well, of course. As Suzuki began to host the reunion, one boy is seen walking around with a long face as one man says, why is he here? Another fellow mate says, you're kidding, right? Aizawa Yuichi. Everyone turns to look at him as one of the fellow students says, Aizawa? Why did he come here? I mean, he dropped out. Suzuki also recalls when they were in school how he would beat Aizawa in front of the other students. Suzuki says, a little shocked, well then, to the fun memories of our time in middle school. Cheers. As everyone says cheers in unison, as the hall was aglow with lights, a man says, that's Aizawa from Class 3-2, right? Another one says, the one who was bullied until he dropped out of school. Would someone like that come to a reunion? Formally? Another one says, who invited him in the first place? Talk about being mentally strong. Just then, someone calls out to Aizawa, Aizawa-kun. As he turns around, a girl says, do you remember me? Aizawa looked at her and said, Takano-san? Takano-san says, you really remember me. She looks down as she says, I've always regretted the things I did back then. I've always wanted to apologize one day. As Takano-san apologized to Aizawa, another student also steps over and apologizes. Just then, another one says, whispering, should we apologize too? His fellow mate says, what? I didn't really do anything that bad, and I didn't want to bully him anyways. But that guy... Just then, Suzuki leans over saying, that guy? The fellow mate stutters. Suzuki-kun? No, I wasn't really. As Suzuki saw Aizawa, he called out, it's been a while, Aizawa. I'm glad we could see each other. Was it in the middle of the third year that you stopped coming to school? We were lonely. Everybody wanted to attend graduation together with you, you know? Another one says, looking at Suzuki. What is he saying? Aizawa says, I'm glad you haven't changed. I've been wanting to see you too, Suzuki-kun. Everyone looks as Suzuki-kun shakes hands with Aizawa. As the reunion comes to an end, a celebration photo was taken. As Suzuki puts his arm across Aizawa, he says, Aizawa, why did you come here for? This party's ruined now that you came here. We were supposed to remember the fun times. Read the mood, idiot. Staying quiet? It's that part of you that makes you so annoying. Suzuki continues, even if we stuck your head in the toilet or threw balls at your face or made you eat garbage, you didn't resist even once. You've really got to liven up a bit. As they stood for the celebration photo, Aizawa asked Suzuki, would the bullying have stopped if I resisted? He says, well, I guess I probably would have. In the end, the one who gets bullied is the one to blame. His sentence shocked Aizawa. As the photographer says, well then, I'm taking it. Suzuki again says, smile. As I replied at first, as I looked down, don't worry, Then Aizawa looked up with a bright smile. I'm good at smiling, don't you know that? Suzuki looks taken back by my words. As Suzuki goes back home, his wife and daughter greet him and they ask him how the reunion went. As his daughter asks him, was everybody different? Suzuki sits back, relaxed, and says, recalling Aizawa, not at all. It's not often people are able to turn their life around. Losers like him always stay as losers. Thanks to you, I'm in a good mood this morning. As Suzuki's daughter, Shiori, comes to school, she looks terrified at her locker. Her locker is a mess, with discriminating notes posted. Just then, a classmate comes over and says, morning, Shiori, what's up? She tries to change the topic as the girl looks over at her locker and says, again. Just then, a voice from behind them says, good morning. Shiori turns around and sees Aizawa standing there. Shiori says, smiling, good morning, Aizawa-sensei. The other girl also says, good morning. Aizawa sees Shiori. Do you have a minute? As she looks surprised. Huh? As we enter the AV room, she asks, what did you want to talk about, sensei? As I was looking out of the window, I ask, recently has anybody been harassing you? Shiori looks shocked. Why are you asking? I say, haven't strange things been happening around you recently? Last week you lost your history book. As she looks down, I say, someone stole it, right? She tries to change the topic, saying, I get along with everybody in class just fine, you know? As I open the button of my sleeve showing her the scars, I say, it's fine if I'm overthinking it, but even a little harassment will grow worse if you leave it alone. I have experienced it myself. She looks shocked. Eh? What? Sensei, what happened to your arm? I replied, a certain guy did it in middle school. She looks shocked. Sensei, you were bullied? That's horrible. To do something like that, they can't be human. As I recalled what he told me, the one who gets bullied is the one to blame. I think, hey, Suzuki-kun, to your own daughter, could you say the same thing? As I continue, that's why if something ever happens, come talk to me right away. I say with a smile. At that time, I'll protect you with all my might. Over at the staff room, the principal was speaking. Well, I'm sure you're all aware the past few days the news has been covering the problem of bullying. This kind of information might influence at least a few of our students, so make sure to be careful and prepared. I'm counting on all of you. Before commencing, he says, then is there anything else anybody wants to report? Seeing everyone quiet. Well then, this morning's meeting is over. Just then, as Aizawa leaves the staff room, Yazaki calls out, Aizawa-sensei. Aizawa turns around and says, Yazaki-sensei. Yazaki says, how are you? Have you gotten used to this school yet? Aizawa says, I wonder. It's only been 2 months since I came here. I'm still unsure about a lot of things. Yazaki says, I've been here for 3 years, but some of the school's convictions still don't sit well with me. Aizawa says, confused. Convictions? Yazaki says, the principals, like what he said just now about bullying. Don't you feel like he was pressuring the teachers? If you ever saw a case of bullying, it would be hard to report it to them, but Aizawa says, replying, if there's ever bullying in my class, I will definitely protect my students. I won't hesitate just because there's pressure from the higher-ups. Yazaki says, surprised, that's some wonderful resolve you have. Aizawa smiles and says, I completely agree with you. Meanwhile in class, Shiori was busy chatting with her friend. Just then, Aizawa comes and says, the bell's already rung, hasn't it? Shiori gets startled. Sorry. As the class began, Shiori began to think about what Aizawa told her yesterday. What sensei said yesterday, it was really shocking. Bullying is what is happening to me bullying, but by who? Just then a student asks, can I ask a question? Are things like your personality genetic? Hearing the question, Aizawa says, personality, huh? That's an interesting question. You could say around half of it is due to genetics. One girl student says, that much? A boy student says, first time I've heard that. As another student asks, your household environment doesn't decide your personality? Aizawa answers, the way your parents raise you and your environment, it actually doesn't influence an individual's personality that much. There's an interesting experiment. You all know what identical twins are, right? Identical twins have 100% of genes match. They are twins who have exactly the same genes. The experiment brought together identical twins who, due to various reasons, had been raised in separate households. Then they checked to see if there were differences in the twins' personalities. If there was a large difference in their personalities, then you could conclude that environment and how you're raised changes your personality. The results of the experiment were, they saw that the twins had very similar personalities, their attitude, integrity, mental strength, and so on. Through various tests, the researchers came to the conclusion that these are all hereditary. Then a girl student says, if half of your personality is decided by hereditary, what's the other half decided by? Aizawa replies, basically, by your social group. There is a strong connection between your personality and the friends you have, one much stronger than the connection with your household, but it would be different from cases such as parental abuse or other abnormal stances. You should only consider fairly normal households to have a small influence. Well, in summary, just remember that your personality is, for the most part, hereditary. Then he says, we went a bit off tangent. Well, let's get back to the textbook. As the class commences, Aizawa calls out, Suzuki, are you okay? You seemed a little off during class. Shiori Suzuki looks back and says, smiling, I'm okay. I just stayed up late yesterday. Aizawa realizes she won't open up, so he says, all right, stay safe on your way home. As Aizawa was about to walk away, Shiori says, Sensei, were you able to stop the bullying that happened to you? Shiori sees Aizawa is surprised, so she says to lighten the atmosphere, I can't help but think about our talk yesterday. Just then, Yumi-chan comes running and says, Shiori, if you don't hurry up, won't you be late for cram school? Shiori looks at her and says, sorry, Yumi-chan. Then she looks at Aizawa and says, Sensei, see you tomorrow. As the girls leave, Aizawa enters an empty classroom. Aizawa recalls one time when Suzuki and his minions had caught him in the bathroom and were bullying him. As 3 boys held him on the floor, one of them says, a death penalty execution. As Aizawa was screaming, stop! Just then, Suzuki, who was holding a bottle, says, I wonder how much it would hurt if you got sulfuric acid on your face. As he pours the bottle on Aizawa's face, Aizawa screams, help me! My face! My face! Just then he stops and feels his face. Suzuki laughs as he says, are you retarded? Getting hurt just from some water. He hits Aizawa with his foot. It's not easy to get your hands on sulfuric acid. Just then, a group of girls enters, and Suzuki looks at them as one of them says, sorry, in the middle of something? We'll come later. As she leaves, Aizawa looks helplessly as Suzuki says, did you think they'd help you? There's no way. There's nobody who needs someone like you. Why are you even alive? As Aizawa comes out of his flashback, he says in his mind, it's because I couldn't stop it, that I'm here now. Over with Shiori as she comes back home, I'm home. Her mother calls out, Shiori, you're home pretty late. Did you go anywhere on the way home? Shiori says, I didn't. After cram school ended, I asked the teacher some math questions. Her mother says, really, that's fine then. Make sure to keep your act together. It's an important time for you right now. Back during your middle school exams, your grades suddenly stopped improving. Everybody else was going to private schools, but you only got into a public one, right? To be honest, for the past 3 years, I've been a little disappointed in you. Shiori keeps the cup back on the table with a little force as she says, Mom, this time I'm sure I'll be able to get into my first choice for university. Just then, Suzuki enters and says, welcome home, Shiori. Shiori says, smiling. Dad? Suzuki says, smiling. Good job working late. Are you hungry? Shiori says, I'm starving. As Shiori tells about school, Suzuki says, the hereditary of personality? Shiori says, yeah, it came up in the middle of science class. I never knew that, so I was surprised. As her mother says from the kitchen, heredity, huh? Just then, Suzuki says, Shiori, you definitely remind me a lot of myself. We're both pretty assertive, right? And also, we're both good at making friends. We can't leave lonely people alone. Shiori says, that might be the case now that I think about it. I really resemble you, Dad. Suzuki says, that makes me happy, as Suzuki keeps his cup of tea down. But that teacher sure talks about some interesting things. I'd like to meet him one day. The next day in class, Shiori says, period 5's going to start. I want to go home. Yumi-chan says, smiling, we're playing basketball in PE next, right? Shiori says, excitedly, right, basketball? It's exam year, so I retired early, though. But I still, Yumi-chan says, looking over at her. You really like basketball, Shiori? Shiori says, of course. I used to be in the club after all. Just then she thinks, huh? My gym clothes are gone. Why? Then she sees her gym clothes are torn and thrown in the trash can. Just then, Yumi-chan says, Shiori? Shiori looks shocked as she thinks, she saw. Then Yumi-chan says, Sensei asked me to help with something. I've got to go and get changed. As Yumi-chan walks away, Shiori thinks, she saw just now, right? But then why didn't she ask anything? Unknown to Shiori, Aizawa was looking over as he recalled Suzuki saying to him back in school, did you think they'd help you? There's no way. So Aizawa walks over and says, Suzuki, what's wrong? As Aizawa recalled Suzuki's words, nobody will offer their help to you. Why are you even alive? As Shiori gets up and runs off, Aizawa says, it must be hard. But Suzuki, the real hell is just beginning. Over at the basketball court, Shiori kept thinking, Yumi-chan, why did you pretend not to see? Just then, Yazaki-sensei comes over to Shiori and says, what are you spacing out for? Is something on your mind? Shiori says, not really. Yazaki says, it's too bad. You finally earned yourself a regular spot, but right before you became a third year, you retired. Shiori looks down and thinks, I didn't want to quit. Yazaki says, well, I'm sure you had your reasons. Then she says, smiling, it's been a while, so today you can just have fun. Shiori thinks as she's playing. I'm playing again after 3 months. I'll enjoy it with all I've got. Besides that, I might just be thinking too much. Just then, she makes a good shot as her teammate says, Shiori, nice shot. Just then, Yumi-chan comes over and says, Shiori, before, with Aizawa-sensei, what were you talking about? Shiori looks shocked as Yumi-chan says, after I left the classroom earlier, you talked to him, right? Shiori says, not really. He just told me to hurry up or else I'd be late to class. Hey, Yumi-chan, why are you asking? Yumi-chan smiles as she goes back onto the court. No reason. Anyways, let's play. Just then, Shiori gets bumped into by a teammate. Sorry, Suzuki-san. Did I hit your head? As Shiori was holding her head, her teammate asks, Are you okay, Suzuki-san? Later on in the infirmary, the doctor says to Yazaki-sensei, She's still completely conscious, so I think she'll be fine. Then the doctor tells Shiori, but just to be sure, you should get some rest. Shiori says, Okay, it was my fault. I was spacing out in the middle of the match. Yazaki-sensei says, It's fine. Well, I'm glad you're both all right. You must have a lot of worries with exams coming up. If you're all right with me, you can talk to me anytime. Then the doctor says, Sensei, we should get her things. Yazaki says, Yeah, I'll get someone from her class too. As Shiori was resting in the infirmary, Aizawa comes along to check on her, and then leaves. As he was going to the staff room, he sees Yumi-chan waiting. Aizawa-sensei. Aizawa says, What's wrong, Yoneda? School's about to end. Yumi-chan says, I'm curious about how Shiori's doing. Aizawa says, According to the nurse, she's fine. Her mother just came to pick her up and go home. Anyways, that's expected. Are you worried about her? Yumi-chan looks shocked as she says, What? What do you mean by that? She's my friend. Of course, I'd be worried. As she leaves, Aizawa says to himself, Friend, is that how it is? As Aizawa enters the staff room, he hears Yazaki say, Her phone? Another student seems to have found it. It looks like it's Suzuki-san's. I see. Then I'll call her guardian. Just then, Aizawa says, It's fine. I've got some printouts I want to give her anyway. I'll give that while I'm at it. As Aizawa reaches Suzuki's home, Suzuki's wife opens the door and says, I'm sorry for having you come all this way. Aizawa says, Not at all. I'm also worried about how she's doing. Mrs. Suzuki says, To be honest, I didn't want her to have a cell phone. I'm afraid it will negatively affect her studies. But she's often late coming from cram school and my husband insisted. Aizawa says, Well, I guess most other parents let their kids have phones, only households that don't allow it. As Aizawa was looking at a picture of Suzuki with his wife and daughter Shiori, her mother says, Sensei, is something wrong? Aizawa says, No. Then suddenly she gets up and says, I'm sorry. Excuse me for a second. Just then the door opens and Shiori enters saying, Sensei. Aizawa replies, Hey, Suzuki, is it all right for you to be up? Shiori says, Yeah, I'm already fine. Anyways, did that photo catch your eye? Aizawa replies, Well, I just thought you all look very happy. Do you like your father? Shiori smiles saying, Yeah, I love him. And you see, that picture is of the first time I was able to ride a bike by myself. She recalled saying, I just tried my best so I could see my father smile. Recalling Suzuki's smile, Aizawa thinks, I also made him smile in the past. Then he says to Shiori, That's a good story, by the way. Your phone's over there. As she checks her phone, she says, Everybody's worried. I'm happy. I have 7 texts. Seeing her smile, Aizawa says, That kind of thing makes you happy. Shiori says, What are you saying? Of course I'm happy. Just then her mother enters, saying, I'm sorry for making you wait. Seeing her daughter, she says, Wait, what are you doing down here? Shiori says, I'm already fine. Anyways, were you calling Dad? Mrs. Suzuki says, Yeah, he'll be home soon. Then Shiori says, Sensei, you should meet my father. He was saying he wanted to meet you too. Mrs. Suzuki says, Hey, wait, your teacher might be busy. As Aizawa leaves, Suzuki arrives tired and calls out, Shiori. As Shiori and Suzuki's wife greet him, Suzuki says, Are you okay? I was worried. Shiori says, Yeah, I'm all right. Oh, that's right. My teacher just left here. I wish you could have met him. He came to give back something I forgot. Suzuki hugs his daughter and says, More importantly, I'm just happy that you are all right. As Shiori was in her room, she checks the messages. One was from Yumi-chan. Are you okay? Does your head hurt? I'm worried. Then Shiori sees another message and says, A direct message? It's from someone I don't follow. So Shiori opens the text and sees a video. She gets shocked on seeing the video. That's me sleeping in the infirmary. No, what is this footage? The next morning, Mrs. Suzuki calls Aizawa, so he says, Hello, I'm on the line. Mrs. Suzuki says, Sensei, thank you for yesterday. Aizawa says, It was nothing. How is Suzuki-san doing after that? Mrs. Suzuki says, Well, when morning came, she said she felt a bit unwell. I'm thinking of having her take the day off and go to the hospital. Aizawa says, Is that so? Mrs. Suzuki says, But it is strange. Yesterday, she seemed much better. I wonder what happened. I'm worried about her. During class, as Aizawa dismisses the class, Nagumo calls out, Yoneda-san, Yumi-chan. Yoneda turns around and says, Nagumo. Nagumo says, Sorry, you get along with Suzuki-san, right? Yumi-chan says, Well, yeah. Nagumo says, I was the one who hit her. I feel responsible. She read my messages but hasn't replied. What about you? Yumi-chan says, me too. Nagumo says, that's really annoying. If you read a message, isn't it common sense to send a reply? Yumi-chan says, I'm sure she's just not feeling well. Nagumo says, no, you can at least send a stamp, right? You always come to school together, right? Yumi-chan says, no. Nagumo says, that's awful. You were just waiting for her for nothing then. Yumi-chan says, what was that? Nagumo says, but honestly, aren't you relieved? That girl is always clinging to you. She even makes you help her study during lunch, Nagumo says, looking down as Aizawa was overhearing them. That's true. Sometimes it seems like it's bothersome for you, Yumi-chan says, looking down. Then she smiles and says, that might be the case sometimes. Nagumo says, right? It's like she's a little bit too close to you. Yumi-chan says, you're right. Meanwhile, Aizawa, who was overhearing them, says to himself, 7 messages of worry. What caring friends? The next day at the infirmary, the doctor says, how are you feeling? Shiori says, after taking it easy for a day, I feel much better. The doctor says, I see, but it seems like you were hit pretty hard. Make sure to be careful for another 2 or 3 days. Shiori says, okay. Also, sensei, I want to ask one thing. While I was sleeping, do you remember if someone came to visit? The doctor recalls and says, someone. A lot of people came. Some girls from your class came. They were all worried about you. Shiori says, anybody else? The doctor thinks and says, well, Aizawa-sensei, I guess? As Shiori was walking in the hallway, she thinks, in the end, I couldn't find out who filmed me, but based on what the nurse said, it has to be someone from my class, right? Have I done anything that would make someone resent me? Please don't spread it. That video. As Shiori enters the class, she calls out, morning. As everyone greets her, Shiori says, I've completely recovered. Yumi-chan says, I was so worried, Shiori. You weren't even replying to my messages. Shiori says, sorry, yesterday I was pretty out of it. Yumi-chan says, handing a book, here, it's what we did in class yesterday. Shiori says, is it okay? Yumi-chan says, you're going to borrow it later anyways, right? As Nagumo says, I'm relieved. A classmate says, that's right. It's partly your fault for hitting her after all. Shiori says, smiling, no, it's not Nagumo's fault. Then Shiori looks at everyone and thinks, are they here? Among all these smiling people? How horrible. Then as Aizawa enters and begins the class, today we'll observe the division of somatic cells. As Shiori was doing the experiment with Yumi-chan, she thinks, I have to make sure not to burden Yumi-chan. She overhears her side desk girl say, you mean this? Himekawa says, yeah, this video is absolutely crazy. What's this? Wouldn't you wake up after something like this? Yumi-chan sees Shiori is worried, so she says, what's wrong, Shiori? As Himekawa says, what he's doing is pretty risky. Yumi-chan, take a look at this. Shiori reacts by throwing Himekawa's phone, saying, stop it. As the phone falls, the students and Aizawa look towards them as Aizawa says, what? Was that Suzuki-san just now? Himekawa gets angry and says, hey, what the hell? That's my phone. As she picks her phone, it seems like the screen didn't break. As Shiori sees it's not her video, Aizawa says as he takes her phone. Can you cut it out? We're in the middle of class. Shiori says, no, it's not. I just misunderstood something. Aizawa says, well, what you did was pretty rude too, but in the first place, you shouldn't be looking at your phone in the middle of class. I'm confiscating your phone until after school. Himekawa gets angry, saying, what? You're kidding me? You don't have to go that far. Aizawa says, it's the rules. Aren't you all taking exams this year? The 4 of you need to pull it together. He looks at Shiori and says, Suzuki, I need to talk to you. As Aizawa comes out of the class, he says to Suzuki, what's wrong, Suzuki? It's not like you to do that kind of thing. Does this have anything to do with why you stayed home yesterday? Shiori says, as her tears well up. Sensei, I don't think I can take this anymore. I want to tell you everything, Sensei. Everything that's happening to me. Will you hear me out? Aizawa says in a calming tone. Didn't I tell you? I'm on your side, Suzuki. Come to the prep room after lunch. I'll be waiting for you. As Shiori came to the cafeteria, she overheard the girls talking about her. So she goes over and says, Yumi-chan, sorry for before. Because of me, even you were. Just then a girl calls, Yumi-chan, let's eat together. Yumi-chan says, no, but seeing Yumi-chan is reluctant, the girl says to Shiori, I don't mind if you go. Seeing Shiori surprised, the girl says, you can eat with us too. Himekawa isn't that angry. As the girls were chatting, Himekawa says, that's right, did you see that message, Yumi-chan? Seeing Yumi-chan is confused, Himekawa says, in the group we made yesterday. Yumi-chan says, yeah, I saw it. Shiori gets shocked as she thinks, so they created a group, and even Yumi-chan is in the group. Just then, Shiori says, sorry, I have to go somewhere, and leaves. Seeing Shiori come out from the cafeteria, Manaka-kun says, Suzuki, huh? It's been a while. Shiori says, thanks for before? You picked up my phone, right? I heard from Yazaki-sensei. Manaka-kun says, oh, so that was your phone. It had fallen under the bench in the courtyard. Shiori screams, that was where I was taking a nap during lunch. As Manaka-kun says, you are as clumsy as always, but it really has been a while since we've talked. Shiori says, we haven't been in the same class since first year. What class are you in now? Monica-kun says, Class 2, as Shiori says, I'm in Class 3. Just then, Monica-kun says, your homeroom teacher. What kind of person is he? Shiori gets surprised as she says, what? He's a really nice teacher. Just the other day he went to my house to return my phone. Why do you ask? Monica-kun says, after school the other day I happened to see him. He was messing around with your phone. It had a pretty unique case. I could tell it was the same phone I had picked up. Just then Shiori says, wait, messing around? Monica-kun says, I don't know what he was doing. As Shiori walks away, she thinks, what was he trying to do? Just then, Aizawa sees her and says, what's wrong, Suzuki? Seeing Aizawa, Shiori says, now that I think about it, whenever I was bullied, Sensei was always coincidentally in the area. Just then, Aizawa says, then let's go to the prep room. Are you done eating now? Seeing Aizawa, Shiori says, sorry, Sensei, let's talk about it another time. As Shiori was about to run off, Aizawa takes hold of her hand, saying, why so suddenly, if there's some reason? Just then, Monica-kun comes over saying, that's harassment. Aizawa calms down and says, Suzuki, let's go to the prep room. You said you'd talk to me earlier, right? We still have time. Shiori says, sorry, Sensei, you are a little untrustworthy. As Shiori runs off, Aizawa says, are you? Monica-kun replies, Monica from Class 2. Aizawa gets angry as he says, did you say anything to her? Monica thinks, this guy, he really isn't normal. Then he says to Aizawa, yeah, I said that after school the other day I saw you messing around with her phone. Why were you doing that? Aizawa says to himself, what a pain. As Manaka asks, what did you? But Aizawa stops him saying, Manaka-kun, in the future, don't talk to her too much. It's better for both of you that way. As Aizawa looks through the window, he sees Shiori and says, I guess I've lost your trust. Well, that's fine. Even then, I will always be watching over you. As Shiori was sitting by herself, she thinks, I don't know anymore. Who can I trust? Who would listen to me? Just then, she sees Yazaki-sensei. She sees Yazaki-sensei say on the phone, hello. Yeah, there's no club today, so I was just going home. I was just thinking I wanted to hear your voice too. Yazaki stops talking for a few seconds as she sees Shiori walking away, then says on the phone, it's nothing. I just thought I saw one of my students. It was just my imagination. Anyways, after I'm done work, I'm not a teacher. I'm just another woman. Meanwhile, Suzuki was dealing with a client who came for a loan, but Suzuki turned him down. As the man walked out crying, the manager came over and said, sorry, Suzuki-kun, you've been cleaning up for everybody. Suzuki smiles and says, not at all. I'm used to dealing with people that try to play the sympathy card after all. As Suzuki leaves, one of his colleagues says, Suzuki sounds really amazing, huh? He just kept smiling while a client started to break down and cry. That guy's a sadist after all. Suzuki, who was overhearing him, thinks, isn't he the perfect example of an elite person? Suzuki smiles and thinks, as he was making out with Yazaki-sensei, that's right. For my whole life, everything has always gone my way. I've never faced defeat for 35 years. Everybody is in the palm of my hand. Classmates, teachers, co-workers, even my boss. They're all a bunch of idiots. Just then, Yazaki says, smiling, Suzuki-san, it was amazing. As Yazaki was putting on her clothes, Suzuki thought, smiling, this woman is too. She's got nothing but her youth. She's a teacher who's as dumb as a brick. She believes anything I say. What a convenient toy. Just then, Yazaki says, it's been 1 year since we became like this. It was at a ceremonial game for the basketball club. You had come to cheer Shiori-chan on, and that's where we met. I'm happy with the relationship we have now. I can feel how much you love me over your wife. But sometimes it's okay. Suzuki comes over and hugs Yazaki. You're the one I love. Then he thinks, I guess it's around time I cut this off. It's been a year. She's starting to get ideas. As Suzuki comes back home, he says, yeah, Shiori? As Suzuki's wife says, she's just taking a bath right now. Suzuki says, I see. Then he thinks, I may not have faced defeat, but I have made a single miscalculation. This woman, leeching so much off me. She got pregnant at 19, and by the time I found out, it was too late to get an abortion. It was all according to her plans. She used that child as a means to fix our deteriorating relationship. Back then, I was furious about it. Just then, Shiori comes down saying, welcome home. Suzuki smiles and says, I'm back. Then he thinks, but now it's different. To be honest, even I'm surprised how it turned out. I love this kid from the bottom of my heart. Then Suzuki asks Shiori, how has school been recently? Shiori recalls the video and then says, well, I've got lots of friends, so I'm having fun every day. As Shiori leaves, Suzuki says to himself, Shiori had such a happy look on her face. Well, of course she's happy. She's been given such a good life after all. On top of that, she's got a young and capable father. She must be really proud of that. As he looks at the reunion picture, he says, I honestly feel bad for the kids of commoners. You'll just drag them down to your level. The next day, as Shiori picks her bag, she recalls her father Suzuki saying, good for you, Shiori, for being born as my daughter. As she looks at her torn books and rude notes, she thinks, why? How long are you going to do this? Just then a fellow student sees her bag and says, Suzuki-san, that's… But Suzuki stops her, saying, it's nothing, really? The girl says, no, it's not nothing. You should talk to a teacher. Meanwhile, Yumi-chan says, hey, Nagumo. As Nagumo looks around, Yumi-chan says, if it's all right, could we invite Shiori to our group chat? I think she feels bad for what she did to your phone, Himikawa. So, if you guys are fine with it, Himikawa says, I'd like to invite her too, you know? But I saw something the other day. Suzuki-san was being friendly with Monika-kun from class 2. As the girls were talking, one girl says, I'm sorry, Himikawa. I knew that you liked Monika-kun. All of the girls talk about you two all the time. Suzuki-san did too. There's no way she doesn't know about it. Meanwhile, out in the hall, Aizawa says, well then, see you, Yazaki-sensei. Yazaki also says, yeah, see you later. Just then, Aizawa and Yazaki overhear the girls. So Aizawa says, bullying? Yazaki says, I can't say for certain, but I feel like there is. Also, Suzuki-san's been acting strangely recently. Has she talked to you about anything? Aizawa says, Yazaki-sensei, in my class there is no bullying at all. Yazaki gets angry and says, you don't plan on doing anything? You're their homeroom teacher. Suzuki-san is clearly worried about something. Don't you think you should at least hear her out? Aizawa says calmly, I am the most familiar with the circumstances of class 5. It's not your place to stick your neck where it doesn't belong. Yazaki turns around saying, all right, fine. I'll just go myself and talk to… Aizawa slams the door shut as Yazaki was about to leave. Aizawa says, that's unnecessary? Could you drop it? I've noticed it since before, but Yazaki-sensei, aren't you especially concerned with Suzuki Shiori? You always treat her favorably. Is there a reason for that? Yazaki gets shocked as she thinks, this guy, he knows. No, there's no way. Then Yazaki says to Aizawa, anyways, as your homeroom teacher, you should hurry up and resolve the situation. Meanwhile, as Shiori comes back home, Monika calls out to Shiori, do you have some time? Shiori says excitedly, yes, I do. I have so much time I don't know what to do with it. Monika says, okay, it's about Aizawa-sensei. From the way he was acting last week, I got the feel there's something strange about him. I went ahead and searched his name on the internet. Shiori says, shocked. What? Did something come up? Monika says, only a post on the faculty website about his transfer here. That was the only thing that I found. In a document from that post, it mentioned the school he was at before, Kayama Middle School. Seeing Shiori confused, Monika-kun says, I had a feeling I'd heard of that school somewhere before. It came up as soon as I searched for it. The school was in trouble for a video of bullying that was uploaded. Around half a year ago, it spread across the internet. Recalling the video, Shiori says, I remember that video. It was also covered a lot on TV. Monika says, yeah, the student was being bullied with extreme violence. His name, address, even his parents' workplaces were leaked. It was a small detail, but something else was mentioned. The victim's class and the homeroom teacher at the time. And that teacher was Aizawa Yuichi, your homeroom teacher. Meanwhile, Suzuki came to meet Yazaki and says to himself, she said that she'd be working late. I guess I'll just go home for today. Just then, Suzuki sees another classmate and says, Shuki Ruko. She was a coordinator for the reunion. She has decent looks for someone her age. Alright, once in a while I should play with other girls. So, Suzuki calls Shuki and has a conversation with her. But during the conversation, Shuki breaks down and says, it wasn't me who contacted them. He even knew my address. Suzuki asks, shocked, What do you mean by that? Shuki says, I was told to say I gathered them. He hasn't forgotten a single thing. For the past 20 years, he's continued hating. Suzuki says calmly, hey, wait. Shuki says, terrified, I couldn't say no. He seemed like he could destroy my life. Suzuki gets angry as he says, I'm telling you to wait a second. Who are you talking about? Just then, from Suzuki's back, Aizawa calls out, Suzuki-kun. Suzuki turns around to see Aizawa, as Shuki says on the phone, it's Aizawa-kun. Aizawa smiles and says to Suzuki, what a coincidence. We haven't met since the reunion. Suzuki gets shocked on hearing Shuki as he thinks, seeing Aizawa, it was Aizawa. Seeing Aizawa, Suzuki says to Shuki on the phone, sorry Shuki, I'll call you back. Shuki says, no, don't call me again. After all, the one that he hates the most must be you. I spread the word about the reunion, just like I was told. I don't want to get involved any more than I have. Sorry. Aizawa smiles and says, was that Shuki-san? Sorry, I heard a bit of your phone call. I saw her at the reunion. She hasn't changed at all, huh? Suzuki looks shocked as Aizawa says, if it's all right with you, could we go for a drink? Do you have some time, Suzuki-kun? At the cafe, Aizawa says, it was pretty nostalgic, the reunion. I'm really glad that I went. More people came than I thought. Recalling what Shuki said, Suzuki says to Aizawa, Aizawa, what was your goal behind setting up the reunion? It wasn't because you wanted to talk about old times, right? Suzuki gets up, slams his hand on the table. Also, our meeting today, was it really a coincidence? Aizawa says, no, it wasn't a coincidence. I found out at the reunion that you work at Sanmaru Bank. I was waiting outside the bank, waiting for you to leave. Suzuki laughs and says, Aizawa, stop screwing around, using such roundabout methods. Are you trying to get revenge? All right, go ahead and try. If you think you have the guts for it, Aizawa says. You're wrong, Suzuki-kun. The reason I asked for her help with the reunion was so that I could overcome my past. A while ago, I went to a certain assembly. It was an assembly for the victims of bullying. I was able to meet with a lot of people who were still suffering from the trauma of being bullied years ago. Somebody at the assembly said, if you can properly confront your past and meet with and talk to the person who caused your trauma, you'll be able to move on. If the person who had bullied you apologizes to you, it might help you cut the ties to your past, Suzuki says, sulkily. That's the reason you set up the reunion? Aizawa says, of course, there's no way I could have organized it myself. I went through our graduation album looking for someone who might be able to help me, and that was Shuki-san. Suzuki says, if what you're saying is true, then you're here to get me to apologize to you? Suzuki says, getting up. Really? Aizawa, you've gotten really cocky, huh? What do you mean apologize? How long are you going to stay in the past? Suzuki turns around and says, I'm going to the restroom. As Suzuki left, Aizawa thought about the time Suzuki bullied him in school, which made Aizawa think, will the scars heal later? Won't they? In 10 years or something? Just then, Suzuki comes back, and as he touches Aizawa's shoulder, Aizawa reacts as he says, sorry, don't mind me. Suzuki laughs and thinks, in the end, this guy hasn't changed at all. His mental state is the same as it was in middle school. And now that I look at it, his suit, isn't it just a cheap suit he bought secondhand for $20? Then Suzuki asks Aizawa, by the way, where do you work now? Could I get a business card? Aizawa says, sorry, I don't really need one for what I do. Suzuki thinks, he doesn't need business cards? Does he work part-time in retail? Well, he definitely doesn't work anywhere respectable. Then Suzuki says to Aizawa, is life right now fun? Dragging on with things from the past? Who cares if it was bullying? It's all stuff that ended 20 years ago, right? And I've said it before, your own gloomy personality was the reason. Aizawa says, Suzuki-kun, if the ones you love were being bullied, could you say the same thing? Suzuki says that the reason they were bullied is because of who they are. People who are bullied lack social skills and can't adapt to their situation. Those kind of worthless failures, I wouldn't be able to love them. And so, Suzuki leaves Aizawa standing alone. Back in his room, Aizawa thinks over and over. It's all stuff that ended 20 years ago, as he recalls Suzuki with his daughter Shiori. Meanwhile, back in school, Shiori recalls what Maneka told her and what Aizawa told her. I have experienced it myself. Shiori thinks, what if Sensei is behind what's happening to me? Is he making his students experience the same things he went through? At the school he taught at before, did Sensei encourage the bullying that happened there? And is he the one who sent that video? Am I overthinking it? Meanwhile, Shiori meets Manaka as he says, you kinda went home in a rush. Shiori says, sorry Manaka-kun, I just kinda lost my composure. Finding out that Aizawa-sensei was the homeroom teacher of a famous bullying incident. About the victim in that video, what happened to him after that? Manaka says, I don't know. Shiori says, wouldn't he, the homeroom teacher, Aizawa, know what happened? Manaka says, well, it's him we're talking about. There's no way he'd tell you if you just ask. As Manaka and Shiori were chatting, some girls see them as one of them says, they're really showing off, huh? Just then, Yumi-chan calls Shiori and says, Shiori, it would be better if you stopped talking to Manaka-kun. It looks like Himekawa likes him. She looked pissed off when she heard you two were talking to each other. Shiori says, shocked, wait, I didn't know anything about that. Yumi-chan says, well, you know now, right? I've warned you, for what it's worth. As Yumi-chan turns around to walk away, Shiori says, is that it? Are the two of us not friends? Until recently, we talked to each other normally. We got excited planning what we'd do for the school trip, like where we'd go during free time. Yumi-chan says, Shiori, do you know that you're surprisingly selfish? You come to ask questions you don't understand, even though I'm trying to study myself. And you always take my notes like you own them. To be honest, you're a nuisance. Wasn't it because of that personality that your gym clothes were thrown out? Shiori gets shocked as she thinks, I'm the reason, and the reason why I'm all alone. It's all my own. Just then a girl kicks Shiori. As Shiori falls, in the classroom, a girl receives a call and says to Himekawa, oh, Himekawa, she kicked Suzuki-san from behind. Aizawa, who was sitting in a chair, says, that sounds painful. As Shiori comes home, her mother says, Shiori, I just got a call. Shiori worries as she thinks, a call? From school? Mrs. Suzuki said, from a teacher from cram school. Your results from this week's tests were considerably below average. Shiori smiles, saying, sorry about that. I've been kind of off my game. But it's all right. I'm going to focus on improving. Mrs. Suzuki says, why don't you stay back from the school trip in a few days? You're in no position to go right now, right? I'm sure your father would agree as well. As Shiori was about to ask why, her mother says, what's with those dirty clothes? You came home in that state? How unsightly. Recalling the incident, Shiori runs upstairs as her mother calls out, for now, I will talk to the school about the school trip. Shiori, I'm still talking. Shiori thinks about calling her father but says in her mind, Dad, No, he said he's busy with a business trip. I don't want to make him worry anyways. Meanwhile, back in class, Aizawa says, Nagumo, would you stop touching things? Nagumo smiles and says, Hey sensei, do you think Suzuki-san's coming today? Aizawa says coldly, who knows? Nagumo says, your plan the other day went well. When you took Himekawa's phone during science class, you scolded Yumi-chan along with us on purpose, right? I wonder if that made her feel some resentment towards Suzuki-san. Like, why me too? If her best friend separates herself from her, won't she have nobody on her side? It's really gotten interesting. Aizawa says, you talk a lot, huh? Nagumo says, yeah, I can talk to you about anything. After all, since that day, you have been someone that's on our side. It was around a month ago, right? You saw me putting trash into Suzuki-san's desk. I thought for sure that you'd get angry, but sensei, you pretended you didn't see anything, even though you should be protecting your students. I was surprised to see you siding with the bully. Aizawa says coldly, I just don't want to get involved with any incidents. Nagumo says, yeah, that may be so. But aren't you having fun too, sensei? By bullying Suzuki-san. I can tell by your expressions. I never asked, but you really hate Suzuki-san, right? Did something happen in the past? Just then, Nagumo gets a call from Himekawa and says to Aizawa, Suzuki-san came. It looks like Himekawa is bringing her behind the school for something. It seems interesting, so why don't you come too? As Shiori comes, the girls gather around. Himekawa says, so, you wanted to talk? Shiori bows her head and says, I'm sorry. Without me even knowing, I hurt my best friend. I think the reason that I've been isolated from class is because my own attitude and actions were the problem. If I caused any of you any trouble, I really am sorry. Himekawa says, what about Manaka-kun? Did you go after him to get at me? Shiori pleads, no, that's wrong. Nagumo says, I don't know, we can't believe you just because you say that, Suzuki-san. Himekawa says, well said. We've been worried about you, you know? We don't know what we'd do if you continued acting the same without remorse. So I'm glad that you took a good look at yourself. I was thinking of telling you, but in the end, it was important that you came to the realization yourself. Trash getting put in your bag and getting kicked from behind, it was all your own fault, Suzuki-san. This is a great chance. Why don't you change starting today? So for a start, why don't you list 10 things that you think are wrong about yourself? As Shiori looks confused, Himekawa says, hey, hurry up and say them. And when you're apologizing, you should sit in seiza. In Japanese, seiza means to get on your knees and apologize, which is also considered an insult for the person who does. Aizawa was looking on from the side and thinks, there's no one around that will defend her. At this rate, she'll start thinking that everything really was her fault. That's how they brainwash her. Look, Suzuki-kun, the punishment you gave me 20 years ago is being given to your daughter right now. Aizawa clenches his fist and walks away. Himekawa gets Shiori to buy drinks for the girls, then Himekawa says to Shiori, watching Aizawa walk away, that's right, Suzuki-san. It's no use even if you go to Aizawa. That guy's on our side after all. The next day, Manaka calls Shiori, but she passes by avoiding him. Just then, Aizawa sees him and calls, Suzuki, I got a call from your mother. You're not coming for the school trip tomorrow? If you're feeling under the weather? Shiori says, I can't believe you can talk to me with a straight face like that. Nagumo told me. You know, she said that you're on their side. You knew about all the harassment up until now, right? Maybe you even helped them. Just like how you were bullied in the past. Now you're making me. Aizawa says, smiling. Suzuki, there's no way I'd do that kind of thing. I wonder why Nagumo went and lied like that. Shiori says, I just realized something. Sensei, whenever you lie, you always smile, don't you? It might have partly been my own fault. So I'll try to live through this painful situation I'm in, but please just don't spread around that video. As Shiori walks away, Aizawa adjusts his tie, which has a camera installed in it, and says, video, huh? Back home, as Shiori lay in bed thanking her mother, she does not have to go to the trip. Her father Suzuki comes and says, I just got back from my business trip last night. I heard that your mom said that you should stay and study instead of going on the school trip, but it's all right now. I went and convinced her otherwise. Shiori tries to plead she doesn't want to go, but Suzuki says, that's horrible of her, huh? To keep you from going on the trip. I went ahead and made sure to contact the school about it. This will be your last chance to go on a trip like this. I remember I had a lot of fun when I went too. When you come back from Kyoto, I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. The next day, as the school bus was about to drive off, Shiori also boards the bus. As Nagumo sees Shiori, she says, Kyoto's going to be a lot of fun. But there is also something I'm interested in. I got this last night from someone I don't follow. Himekawa says, seeing the video, this is Suzuki-san, right? Nagumo says, I was also surprised when I saw it. As Yumi-chan looks shocked, Nagumo says, if this got spread around, I wonder what would happen to that girl. Just then Yazaki says, Aizawa-sensei, do you have a minute? You took on the job of taking attendance before bed, right? And on top of that, you signed up to patrol for 3 hours. Aizawa says, is there a problem? Yazaki says, I thought you'd be the type of person to avoid those kind of duties. Why did you go out of your way this time? Aizawa says, it's because I am that type. I'll work hard now. To make up for all the times I've avoided things, I've got to do my best to support my students so that they can all make good memories. Just then, Himekawa says, "That's right, I found an interesting video." Yumi-chan gets worried as she says to herself, "No way! Is she planning to show it to them here? If it gets spread around, Shiori will." But before Yumi-chan could say anything, Aizawa comes over and says to them, "You guys, your voices are too loud. And let me remind you, cell phones are prohibited on this trip. Depending on the circumstances, they might get confiscated." Just then, guidance counselor Kaneda comes along saying, "Please keep it down." As Shiori was in one of the restrooms, she overhears Nagumo saying, "It was just sent to me yesterday." The footage of Shiori sleeping in the infirmary. Yumi-chan asks, "Do you have any idea as to who it was? The person that sent you the video?" Nagumo says, "No, but they were in the infirmary, so it had to have been someone within the school." Yumi-chan thinks, "So apart from Himekawa, there are other people that have a grudge against Shiori?" Nagumo turns around and says, "Then I'm going." Yumi-chan calls out, "Ah, wait, about that video. Don't show it to the others. I mean, it's not like you're bullying Shiori. You said you are just reforming her, right? If something like that spreads, she won't be able to recover. At worst, something like hurting herself." Nagumo smiles and says, "I got it. I'll delete that video." "Yeah, that would be going too far after all." Nagumo thinks, "If she hurt herself, I won't be able to play with her anymore." As everyone was busy looking at the animals, Himekawa says, "Aizawa-sensei, thanks for before." Seeing Aizawa is confused, Himekawa says, "Yeah, you gave me a sigh, right? When my phone nearly got confiscated. But it was surprising. I thought for sure Suzuki-san wouldn't be coming on the school trip." Aizawa says, "So did I." Just then, Himekawa notices a deer and says, "Hey, sensei, why is that deer away from the herd?" As Himekawa overhears the conversation between Aizawa and Nagumo, she thinks, "All right, as soon as possible, we need to get Suzuki-san back into the pack." Meanwhile, Himekawa gets an opportunity to meet Manaka, so she says, "I've been waiting to get along with you, Manaka-kun." She leans over, saying to Manaka, "Hey, do you know what Suzuki-san's really like?" Manaka says, "By Suzuki, you mean?" Seeing Manaka is confused, Himekawa says, "From my class, she's actually pretty crazy, you know? She's the type that values scoring with men more than her friendships with other girls." Just then, as the girls were enjoying a warm bath, Nagumo smiles and thinks, "The Suzuki Shiori from the basketball club, who used to shine so brilliantly, is now my toy." Just then, Himekawa says, "Isn't Suzuki taking a while? She should be back by now." Suddenly, Nagumo gets up shocked and thinks, "There's no way." Nagumo runs to her bag. "My phone's gone. That time I thought she was looking strangely close, the pattern for my lock screen. Is she trying to erase that video? Does she think I filmed it? Damn, she's just my toy. How dare you bare your fangs at me?" Meanwhile, Shiori manages to delete the video and goes to her room. As Shiori enters, she sees the girls as Nagumo says, "By the way, where is my phone?" As Shiori says, "I don't know." Nagumo says, "Don't lie, you thief. Then where have you been for the past 2 hours?" "I'm disappointed, Suzuki-san. You're not reflecting on your actions at all." Shiori says, "I might have partly been at fault as well, but I don't remember doing anything to deserve that." Just then, Nagumo slaps Shiori as Aizawa comes to check. Nagumo says, "There is no problem here." Aizawa sees Shiori holding her cheek, but he only says, "Seems like it," and leaves. As Aizawa leaves, Himekawa says, "Why didn't he warn us about moving rooms?" Nagumo says, "Sensei's on our side. That means that this is punishment that's approved by a teacher." As the girls grab Shiori, she says, "No." Aizawa, who was walking away, hears Nagumo say, "Let's get started." Nagumo says, "Now that I think about it, Suzuki-san, you didn't bathe? I don't think that's good, Suzuki-san. For a 15-year-old to be skipping baths, it's kind of ruining my mood." As Nagumo drenches Shiori, Nagumo says, "That's why no one in class stands up for you, isn't it? Not even your teammates from the basketball club." Nagumo begins to blame Yumi-chan as Yazaki and Kaneda come to check. On seeing Shiori, Yazaki runs over saying, "Suzuki-san, what did you girls do to her?" Nagumo says, "Sorry, we got carried away. We were playing around a bit with water." Yazaki says, "Playing around?" Kaneda also says, "Just what are you girls doing? I get that you're all very close." Yazaki says, "Wait, Kaneda-sensei, do you really think that's all that's going on?" Just then, Aizawa comes and says, "Did something happen?" Yazaki says, "Where were you?" Aizawa replies, "I went to the restroom." Yazaki says, "The restroom? Is that really true?" Kaneda says, "Calm down, Yazaki-sensei." Then he says to Aizawa, "As you can see, some students apparently snuck out and caused a racket." Aizawa says, "Oh really?" Yazaki says, "You girls, get back to your own rooms. When we get home, I'll have you all write apology letters." As Yazaki dries Shiori's hair, she says, "Aizawa-sensei, I'll take care of patrolling for tonight and tomorrow. Please let me handle it." Back in school, everyone was talking about the phone. Aizawa says to Nagumo, "What happened with your phone was a real mess." Nagumo says, "Sensei, Yeah, it was a disaster. The video from the infirmary was a masterpiece, too. I never thought she'd go as far as to destroy my phone to get rid of it. Aizawa asks, confused. Video? Nagumo says, oh, I guess I never properly explained it to you. When Suzuki-san was sleeping in the infirmary the other day, you saw me visiting there, right? Aizawa recalls saying. At that time, huh? It seemed like her clothes had been messed up. Nagumo says, yeah, I filmed a bit of a risque video. Man, I really shouldn't have deleted the fake account I made when I sent that video. Aizawa asks, are there copies? Nagumo says, there's none. After all, I never thought something like this would happen. I'll have to think of some other interesting plan. Yazaki confronts Aizawa about Shiori, but Aizawa says, perhaps you have some kind of relationship with her father? Yazaki says, yeah, I'm in a relationship with him. We really are in love with each other. It's unfortunate, but he's fallen out of love for his current wife. And with what had happened during the school trip, I found the resolve to come to a decision. I'll make sure to protect Suzuki-san. Yes, I've decided that I'm going to become her mother. I need to make sure I stay close to her, and Aizawa begins to laugh as he says, no, there's just no way I can keep a straight face after that. You've decided, you say? Who cares about that? Have you even considered Suzuki's feelings? I can't believe you can say you'll become her mother. Meanwhile, back home, Mrs. Suzuki sees Yazaki calling on her husband, Suzuki's phone, so she asks him. Suzuki gets angry and throws a glass of water on her face, saying, the hell's with you? You think I'm cheating or something? You're so incompetent you can't even properly watch over my daughter's education. In the first place, telling her to skip the school trip and study is something wrong with your head. All right, it's fine. Just go and wash your face. Don't you know there's no way I would fall in love with another woman? As Shiori was about to take a drastic step, she stops and thinks, what was I thinking of doing? Just then, Shiori sees Aizawa across the rail track as he calls out, what are you thinking so hard about, Suzuki? I was worried you were going to jump. Seeing Aizawa, Shiori says, why? Have you been following me? Aizawa says, of course not. This is just the way I go home. Anyways, just now. Shiori gets angry and says, you want to know why I thought of doing that? Why are you even worrying about me at this point? You didn't care when you saw what was happening on the trip. I see. You do everything you can to stay away from trouble after all. If I had taken the step, then you might be held responsible. Aizawa says out, don't be stupid. Do you really think that's how I would treat you? Shiori says, I know it was Nagumo who took the video. You might not have even known she did it, but just so you wouldn't have to deal with anything, you pretended not to see anything. As Aizawa was about to say something, Shiori's phone rings, so she takes the call. Hello? Yeah, sorry, Dad. Suzuki says, we were worried, Shiori. It's gotten late and you're still not back. Are you with your friends right now? Shiori says, right now I'm with... Aizawa reaches to take the phone, saying, should I say something? Suzuki says, what's wrong? Who are you with? Shiori tells her dad she's with her friends and will be coming back soon. As Shiori disconnects the call, Aizawa says, I'll walk you home. Aizawa says, I'm fine. It's not that far. As Shiori turns to leave, Aizawa calls out, Suzuki, I am on your side. As Shiori walks away, she thinks, Sensei smiles when he lies. Right now, what kind of expression does he have? Meanwhile, as Suzuki was getting some food from the stall and thinking about his work, Shiori calls out, Dad! Seeing Shiori, Suzuki thinks, that's right. It's been a while since I spent a weekend with my daughter. I should forget about work for today. That's what a good father would do. So Suzuki asks, so how was the school trip? Shiori says, it was pretty fun. Suzuki says, do you have any pictures? I haven't seen any yet. Seeing Shiori looking down, Suzuki says, Shiori, did you forget to charge the camera? You were always pretty clumsy with that kind of stuff. You weren't allowed to use your phone, right? Shiori is worried, but says, actually, things aren't going well at school right now. The school trip honestly wasn't that fun. Shiori thinks, up until now, I've been acting cheerful in front of my parents. I didn't want to make them worry, but the truth is, I'm being bullied. So Shiori tells her father Suzuki, somebody's been turning my friends against me. To be honest, it's been really difficult. Dad, Suzuki says, jealousy, huh? You're cute and you study well too. Of course there are people that would get jealous of someone like you, but there's no reason for you to worry about trash like them. Next year, you should go to a prestigious private school. You can make a lot of friends with people who are on your level. And look, you still have Yumi-chan, right? Don't keep those idiots company. Staying together with clever kids like her is for the best. Shiori says, but Dad, Just then, Suzuki sees Yazaki waving at him. Seeing Yazaki, Suzuki thinks, what? Why is that woman here? So Suzuki says to Shiori, sorry Shiori, I'm going to the restroom. Suzuki grabs Yazaki and says, what the hell is going on here? Yazaki recalls what Aizawa said, I don't think the man in question actually loves you, you know? So Yazaki says to Suzuki, no matter how many times I called, you didn't reply, so I got worried. I've been following you ever since you left your house. Suzuki says, shocked in his mind, from my house? This crazy woman. She's a complete stalker. Yazaki says, I was watching the two of you together. It was very heartwarming to see. It would be great if I could be a part of it soon. The fact that you all have to live together even though your relationship has fallen apart. I don't think it's very good for Shiori-chan. When you finally get a divorce, let's make a happy household with the three of us. Suzuki thinks, this is bad. This is completely outside of my plans. So Suzuki says to Yazaki, for now, could you go home? My daughter must be waiting for me. As Yazaki leaves, she says, I love you, Suzuki-san. As Yazaki leaves, Suzuki thinks, there hasn't been a single second that I have loved you. Damn, I thought I had her completely under control. I never thought she'd do something like this. I have to hurry up and deal with her. As Suzuki comes back to Shiori, he says, sorry about that. What were we talking about? The next day at school, Manaka calls Shiori and says, sorry for calling you all of a sudden. Shiori says, it's fine. Manaka says, there are rumors going around. Are you all right? They're saying that you stole Nagumo's phone. And for the past few days, haven't you been avoiding me? Shiori says, sorry, from now on, I don't want you to talk with me anymore. Not here or at school. Seeing Shiori looking down, Manaka says, what happened? If you're all right with me, I'll hear you out. Shiori looks down and tells Manaka everything. Manaka gets shocked and says, what's with that? You can't call that just teasing. Shiori says, it's my fault. As Manaka says, shocked. What? Shiori says, nobody tried to defend me. Not Yumi-chan, who I thought was my best friend, or my teammates from the basketball club. I thought there wasn't any good reason why I was being bullied, but maybe I was wrong. The reason why I'm being bullied, Manaka says, there's no way that's true. I get that relationships can go wrong because of differences in personalities. I've even experienced that kind of thing. But to say that's the reason why you've been going through what you have is definitely wrong. There's no reason for getting bullied. There should never be a reason for it. Shiori only said, that would be nice. It would be nice if everything could return to how it was before. If I could get along with my friends again. Manaka thinks, friends? You mean the people who aren't helping you even in this situation? Then Shiori says, Manaka-kun, thank you. But Manaka says, yeah, but in the first place, under normal circumstances, your homeroom teacher should be taking care of things. But with Aizawa, Shiori says, to be honest, I can't trust Sensei at all anymore. I ran into him by coincidence on my way home from the school trip. But it's strange. I seem to run into Sensei by coincidence often. Just then, Manaka thinks, there's no way. Then Manaka says to Shiori, hey, can I see your phone for a second? As he goes through the apps, Manaka says, within your apps, are there any you don't remember installing yourself? Shiori says, looking at her phone, well, there's not really any. Wait, what's with this tracking app? I don't know anything about this. Manaka says, remember what I said before? That I saw Sensei messing with your phone? Maybe he installed that app then and has been keeping you under surveillance ever since? Shiori says, shocked. I don't get it. Why is he doing this? As Shiori says, just what kind of person is he? Manaka says, Kayama Middle School. Maybe if we ask someone who was his student before, we can find something out about who he is. Maybe someone related to the bullying incident. Shiori says, but they should be in high school by now, right? We're strangers to them, so it would be hard to get a conversation with them. Manaka says, actually, I've been thinking about that. Meanwhile, Aizawa was going through the video recordings of Shiori and the girls. Just then, Nagishi comes out of school as Manaka calls out, Nagishi-san, could we talk to you? Nagishi says, the incident a year ago? Manaka says, I understand it's rude to ask, but there's something we have to know. As Nagishi turns around saying, there's nothing to talk about. Shiori calls out, Nagishi-san, I'm getting targeted right now. Manaka says, hey, Suzuki. Shiori says, I mean, we're asking Nagishi-san about something he probably doesn't want to remember. I need to at least let him know about my own situation. Nagishi says, so what if you're getting targeted? I don't think that has anything to do with me. Shiori says, yeah, but there's one thing that we have in common, that our homeroom teacher is Aizawa-sensei. As Nagishi looks shocked, Shiori says, yes, the two of us wanted to ask you about him. Manaka says, the other day we found a suspicious app on her phone, a GPS tracking application. It seems like Aizawa was the one who installed it for some reason. Also, he hasn't been helping her even though he's her homeroom teacher. He's clearly helping out the bullies and the bullied. Shiori says, how was he when he was your homeroom teacher? If there's something you know about Aizawa-sensei, please tell us. Nagishi recalls Aizawa as Shiori says, I'm sure it's troubling for us to ask something like this, but we really wanted to know about it. I'm currently in the same place you were in. Nagishi says, the same place? You and me. Don't screw with me. You don't know anything about me. As Nagishi says, I hope that those bullies are miserable right now. Shiori gets shocked as she says, I'm really sorry for today. I won't cause you any more trouble. Back in school, a meeting was going about as Yazaki says, can I say something? As the principal asks, Yazaki says, I'm in charge of a different class and, to be honest, it's hard to talk about, but Suzuki Shiori from year 3, class 5. That girl is currently being targeted. As the other teachers get shocked, the principal says, Aizawa-sensei, is that true? Aizawa says, no, there's none. Seeing no one is hearing her, Yazaki says, please wait. Even before that, I had seen signs of it. We can't leave it be any longer. Aizawa says, you're being too emotional. If you're going that far, do you have any concrete evidence? Yazaki gets angry. You really have the nerve asking for that. Even now she might be. The principal says to Yazaki, well, calm down. It's a sensitive time for the students, so they must have a lot going on. As for this case, I'm sure you're overthinking it. Rather than targeting, they're just playing around. Aizawa says, Sensei, rather than students outside of your class, shouldn't you worry about your own students? There are those in your class who move around during lectures or stand out due to their bad behavior. As another teacher says, that's true. There are a lot of students in Class 1 without proper manners. In the meantime, as Nagumo was showing her new phone, she sees Shiori and Monika. Nagumo says, hey you two, you're getting along well as usual, huh? Himekawa says, Monika-kun, did you know? Thanks to this girl, Nagumo had to buy a new phone. Then Himekawa says to Shiori, you're going to pay for it, aren't you? As Monika says, knock it off you two. Aren't you embarrassed by targeting her like elementary students? Himekawa says, wait, we're not targeting. Suzuki's just trying to get between us. Monika says, laughing, was there anything between you and me? Honestly, you're annoying. As Monika and Shiori walk away, Himekawa thinks, ever since you were in the basketball club, I hate your smile from the bottom of my heart. Meanwhile, Suzuki got a promotion. Suzuki's head says, you're being transferred to the main branch. You'll be a manager in the first sales department. Suzuki thinks, here it is, the main branch, and on top of that, the first sales department. This is the promotion I've been waiting for. This is a good pace. If things continue smoothly, I could be an executive. Even becoming the president is within reach. Just then, the head says, Suzuki-kun, the reason why I sent you to the most superior branch was because of your many achievements as an assistant manager. This promotion was only a matter of time. Suzuki looks shocked as the head says, but it's at times like this that people make mistakes. The official notice will be announced a month from now. If something happens in that time, your position will be reconsidered. It's essential for you to be careful, especially with your relations with women. Suzuki recalls Yazaki as the head says, well, if it's you, there's no need to worry. Suzuki smiles and says, yes, I'm dedicated to my wife, after all. As Suzuki goes back to his desk, Suzuki thinks, I need to take care of her immediately. So Suzuki begins to delete her information and chats. Yazaki gets a call from her mother. Yazaki's mother asks, are things going well at work? Yazaki says, well, to be honest, it's really stressful. There's a lot of people in the workplace who lack morals. Well, I'm thinking of quitting soon. I'm thinking of getting married. The next day at the teacher-parent meeting, as Aizawa meets with Mrs. Suzuki, Mrs. Suzuki says to Aizawa, thank you for the other day. You went all the way to our house for our daughter's sake. Aizawa says, no, it's my duty as her homeroom teacher. Shiori thinks, as my homeroom teacher? What a shameless lie. The reason you brought it was so that you could install a tracking app, right? I don't know why he has me under surveillance though, and there's no proof it was really him that installed it. Seeing Shiori lost in her thoughts, Mrs. Suzuki says, Shiori, are you even listening? We're talking about your future right now? Mrs. Suzuki asks, has she been doing well in school? Aizawa says, yeah. From what I've seen, it seems like she's been doing well recently. She's just going through puberty. She's bound to be worrying about a lot of things, especially the relationships with her classmates. Well, Suzuki also has other teachers that she can rely on. Looking towards Shiori, Aizawa says, you always go to her for that kind of advice, right? The advisor for the basketball club, Yazaki-sensei. Aizawa again looks at Shiori and says, it seems like Suzuki used to be in the basketball club. I'm sure it was then that you built a trusting relationship with her. Mrs. Suzuki's expression changes as she says, you get along with Yazaki-sensei? Even after you quit the basketball club? Shiori says, yeah, I guess. She's the teacher I trust the most in this school. She's a good person and very kind. If I need advice, I go to Yazaki-sensei. Mrs. Suzuki bangs her hand on the table. Seeing her, Shiori says, Mom? Mrs. Suzuki says, a good person. Ever since we met, that woman has been. Just then, Aizawa says to Mrs. Suzuki, did something happen with Yazaki-sensei? Mrs. Suzuki says, I'm very sorry. I just remembered something I have to do. I'll excuse myself here. As she walks out of the office, Shiori calls out, wait, Mom? As Mrs. Suzuki leaves, Aizawa says to Shiori, I wonder what that was about. We still have some time, so how about we continue the interview? Shiori says, it's not like you're planning to help me. You put a tracking app on my phone and monitored me without telling me. What the hell are you after? Did you do the same thing to Nagishi-san from the previous school you worked at? So, even you lose your composure, sensei. I'm leaving. Meanwhile, as Shiori finds her mother still in the hallway, Mrs. Suzuki thinks, is that woman Yazaki trying to destroy our family? She's even trying to win over our daughter. Just then, Yazaki calls out, are you Mrs. Suzuki? It's been a while. Is your parent-teacher interview over? My class's interviews are also just about finished up. Then Yazaki sees Shiori and goes over saying, are you okay, Shiori-chan? as Shiori looks confused at Yazaki's behavior. Yazaki continues saying, "You had so many things you wanted to talk about the other day, right? It's been on my mind ever since." Mrs. Suzuki looks furious as she says to Shiori, "Shiori, could you go home ahead of me? Your mother has something to talk about with Yazaki-sensei." As Shiori comes to the reception area, she sees Negishi as the receptionist says, "If you don't have an appointment with Aizawa-sensei, I'm very sorry." Seeing Negishi, Shiori thinks, "Is that Negishi-san? Did he come to see sensei? Even though he said he didn't want to remember anything when we met, is he planning to do something? Maybe he still resents sensei." As Negishi begins to run off seeing Shiori, she calls out, "What are you planning to do if you found sensei?" Negishi says, "Who knows?" Meanwhile, Suzuki comes back home. As he enters, seeing the lights off, he says, "Hey, is no one home? Shiori should be at cram school, but is she already asleep?" Suzuki thinks, "Tomorrow I'll meet with Yazaki, but still, did a meeting come up or something?" She's never canceled a meeting at the last minute before, and make sure she deletes our messages. Just then, Suzuki opens the bathroom door and finds his wife in the bathtub and goes running over. "What the hell are you doing? Hang in there," Mrs. Suzuki says weakly. "Honey, I always trusted you," as tears roll down her cheeks. Suzuki says, confused, "Trusted me?" As he was calling the ambulance, Shiori arrives and says, "Dad, did something happen to Mom?" Suzuki says, "Don't go to the bathroom, your mom." As Shiori runs to the bathroom, Suzuki calls out, "Wait, Shiori, don't look." Shiori screams, "No, why did she do that?" As Suzuki was trying to stop the bleeding, Shiori says, "At that time, I shouldn't have left her alone with Yazaki-sensei." As Suzuki says, shocked, "Yazaki," Shiori says, "It seemed like Mom hated her for some reason, but I didn't know why this happened." Suzuki recalls, "I see. The parent-teacher interview was today. That woman, she must have told everything to my wife. In that case, the cause of this is my." Shiori calls out, "Hey Dad, do you know anything about this?" Suzuki says, "Shiori, I have no idea." Suzuki thinks, "No matter what, I'll never let my daughter find out." Meanwhile, Aizawa was on the phone. "But I was surprised. Apparently you came to my school today?" "I know. You have a lot you wanted to ask about, right? Let's talk for a bit, Negishi." Suzuki enters the hospital room and says, "Shiori, sorry I'm late. The police investigation took longer than I thought it would. How is she?" Suzuki brings Shiori out of the room as Shiori says, "There were several deep wounds, but her life's not in danger. They said she'll need to stay at the hospital for a while." Suzuki says, "I see." Then Suzuki thinks, "What I have to worry about is her mental state. I'm in a bad spot. What if she talks to Shiori about my affair? I'm pretty sure she'd never do that, but I should warn her just in case." Just then Shiori says, "Dad." Shiori hugs her father. Suzuki says, surprised, "Shiori?" Suzuki hugs Shiori and says, "Don't worry, Shiori. No matter what, your father will protect his family." Then Suzuki thinks, "There's no more time. Today, I will definitely end things with that woman. Before she says anything crazy, I have to completely erase all the evidence." As Suzuki enters, he says, "Can I come in?" Yazaki says, "Of course, but I'm surprised you came over to my house. I was just about to go to school." Suzuki says, "What did you say to her? You talked to my wife yesterday, right?" Yazaki smiles, saying, "Yeah, I met with her." After Yazaki says she told Mrs. Suzuki about her and Suzuki's affair, Yazaki says, "It was taking you so long to cut ties with her. I couldn't help myself. So, regarding the divorce, what did your wife say?" Suzuki says, "Actually, my wife harmed herself. She wounded her wrists. She's at the hospital right now. My daughter's very anxious right now. If it gets out that her mother hurt herself because of I and your, Yazaki, affair, I can't imagine how Shiori would feel. On top of that, she might never be able to forgive you." Yazaki says, "You're probably right." Suzuki says, "That's what I want to avoid the most. So, about the messages sent between us. Just to be sure, could you delete them, in case you forget your phone at school or something? There's a chance that my daughter could see those messages. It probably won't happen, but just in case." Yazaki says, angrily, "I don't want to." Calming down, Yazaki says, "I mean, these messages are a collection of the love between the two of us, right? There's no way I'd delete them." Suzuki thinks, "Is this woman for real?" As Yazaki says, dialing a number, "She might hate me at first, but I'm sure she'll come to understand at some point. Instead of leaving a chance, why don't we properly talk to Shiori about it? If we make her understand how serious we are, I'm sure that she'll come to accept it." Yazaki thinks, "That's right. If it's the two of us, we'll be able to overcome any obstacles." Suzuki takes hold of Yazaki's phone and says, "You're completely revolting." As Yazaki looks shocked, Suzuki says, "Whatever, I'm tired of this. Messages of love between us? Sorry, I didn't mean a single thing I said in these messages. I just wanted to kill some time while I was bored. Besides, we never took a picture with the two of us together, right? Normally, you'd figure it out from that kind of thing." Yazaki says, "Why? Why are you saying such nonsense? Is it because I suddenly asked you to talk to Shiori? Then I won't say anything. I apologize, so don't hate me." Suzuki says, "I don't hate you or anything. I just don't have any strong feelings towards my Time Pass buddies. I deleted your account on that messaging app. You won't be able to get it back. There's also the local history. As Yazaki says, I can't breathe. Suzuki says, and besides that, yeah, I think it's fine now. Don't go and have any more weird ideas, okay? Well, it'll just be written off as a stalker's delusions, though. As Suzuki comes out of Yazaki's home, he dials Shiori's school and says, Hello, I'm Year 3 Class 5's Suzuki Shiori's father. Could I talk to her homeroom teacher? As Aizawa takes the call, Aizawa says, Hello, I'm on the line. Suzuki says on the line, Hi, thanks for always taking care of my daughter. About her, it seems she's not feeling well right now. I think I'll have her take it easy and stay at home for today. Aizawa says, Is that so? She had also gotten injured in gym class recently, so you must be worried about her health. Suzuki says, Yeah, there's nothing more important than my daughter. As Aizawa comes out of his office, he hears some students talking. Nagao says, Did you hear about it? Wakuni says, About Class 5's Suzuki, right? Nagao says, There was an ambulance and police in front of her house. Wakuni says, Yeah, according to someone in the neighborhood, her mother was being carried out. The next day, as Shiori comes to school, the students were whispering about her mother, as Himekawa comes over saying, Are you okay, Suzuki-san? Everybody was really worried. They said something happened at your house? Just what? Sorry, it must be insensitive to ask, but if anything happens, you can talk about it. We're on your side. As Nagumo teases Shiori, Shiori gets angry and slaps Nagumo and pins her to the ground saying, Why? Why would you do such horrible things? You're not human. Himekawa says, What are you doing? Suddenly getting so violent. And what do you mean by horrible things? As Shiori says, That drawing over there. But Himekawa had already picked the drawing and says, What are you talking about? Since the drawing was not there, the students demanded Shiori apologizes to Himekawa. But Shiori says, I'm not wrong. Yumi-chan, Himekawa, Takahashi, Nagumo, even if it kills me, I will never give in to the likes of you. Nagumo says, pretending, Even though you've done horrible things, I still think of you as a friend, you know. As a friend, if your mother, Shiori yells, Stop! Don't lie and pretend like you're worried. It's not just what you've done to me. I'll never forgive you for making fun of my mother. What made you hate me so much to go that far? Nagumo says, There's no reason. As she plunges onto Shiori, Takahashi says, Nagumo, it's bad of you go too far. People are looking right now. Nagumo says, No reason? You don't know anything. Everything is your fault. Just then Kaneda and Aizawa enter as Kaneda-sensei says, Hey, what are you guys doing over there? What's going on? Somebody explain. Aizawa says, Yoneda, can you tell us what happened? Yumi-chan says, Suzuki-san. For no reason, Suzuki-san punched Nagumo in the face. Himekawa says, Yeah, she did. Takahashi says, It surprised me. As Kaneda asks Suzuki, Aizawa says, Kaneda-sensei, I'll take care of things from here. As Shiori passes Yumi-chan, she says, Having fun? Meanwhile, as the girls were discussing, Nagumo says, Trap Suzuki-san and get someone to attack her. Takahashi says, Wait, what are you saying? Himekawa says, That's too risky. Who knows what will happen if we get caught? Nagumo says, If only we still had that video of her in the infirmary. Yumi-chan says, That video should still be in the servers. As Nagumo checks her cloud storage, she finds Shiori's video saying, It's there. But you're so mean, Yumi-chan. You should have told me earlier. Seeing Yumi-chan is quiet, Nagumo says, Well, she was your best friend until recently, but good thing you cut ties with her. As Yumi-chan recalls the day Shiori hugged her and said, We'll be good friends from now on. Yumi-chan thinks, I'm not a bad person. Shiori made me do this. Back in Aizawa's office, he says to Shiori, Did you get into a fight because of what happened to your mother? I've been hearing rumors. They say your mother… Shiori says, She hurt her wrists. As Aizawa looks shocked. Shiori says, Then those girls laughed about it like it was funny. I don't know if there's a reason why they hate me so much, but to go that far, the reason doesn't matter. Aizawa says, Bullies are just evil. Shiori gets shocked saying, What? What are you saying at this point? Sensei, you don't even… Aizawa says, I told you before, right? That I had been targeted in the past. The hurting was so harsh it left scars all over my body. By fall of 3rd year, I stopped leaving my house completely. It's fine if I run away. At that time, I thought that was fine, but deep down, I had other thoughts. Why was I the one who had to drop out instead of the ones who bullied me? The ones who struggle always get the short end of the stick. I recently met with someone, he was the one who bullied me the most. It surprised me how little he's changed. Then that man told me that I had stopped getting bullied 20 years ago. But that's not true. It hasn't stopped. For 20 years, I have never forgiven them. Shiori says, I've also been thinking recently, for how long will I be targeted? Even if it calms down, will I be able to smile like I could before? These feelings of hatred will always. Aizawa says, do you hate them? Shiori says, of course I hate them. Those people don't deserve to be alive. Aizawa says, you're right. People who bully others must be punished. I wasn't able to carry out that punishment and have been obsessed with it for 20 years. Suzuki, you need to end things here and now. Aizawa hands Suzuki some pictures. If you show that, they won't be able to make any excuses. But Suzuki-san, if you want to do more than that to them, there's another option for you. But you have to be the one to decide in the end, Suzuki. The next day, Nagumo planned to release Shiori's video in class. But when she was ready, she says, what? Did I type it in wrong? Just then, Shiori says, Nagumo, why did you post these things? Nagumo looks shocked as she says, what? What things? I haven't even posted anything yet. Let me see. As the videos play, Nagao says, were those voices Nagumo and her friends? So that means? Don't tell me this is… Nagumo says, that's wrong. This is some kind of mistake. Who the hell posted? Just then, Aizawa comes saying, Nagumo, what is this? You did these horrible things to Suzuki-san? Nagumo gets angry, saying, what are you saying? You're on our side. Just then, Genjo says, the one being censored is Suzuki-san, right? I can't believe they do this. This is just bullying. Just then, Yumi-chan runs out of the class as Nagumo, Himekawa, and Takahashi run behind her. Nagumo stops Yumi-chan, saying, wait up, Yumi-chan. Yumi-chan says, what the hell was that? What the hell did you do to mess up that badly? Hurry up and delete it. Nagumo tries to open her account, but fails again. Takeshi says, take responsibility. I honestly didn't want to do those things anyway. As Nagumo looks shocked, Takahashi says, it's the truth. You two were the only ones who had grudges with her. I didn't care about her at all. Nagumo says, if you don't care, don't get involved. Just then, Aizawa comes and says, we're still in the middle of homeroom. Yumi-chan says, Sensei, what are we supposed to do from now on? Aizawa says, from now on? It'll be horrible. There's probably some students who have already saved the videos. There's no avoiding it spreading. Well, you get what you deserve. Yumi-chan says, what do you mean? Sensei, weren't you on our side? Aizawa says, your side? I have never once said anything like that, have I? Nagumo comes over and says, hey Sensei, was it you that got into my account? It was you that locked out my phone. Aizawa says, don't be stupid. I've been busy all morning. I think you've got the wrong person, but you should be careful with your phone. If the phone you're using now is from someone you don't know, who knows what kind of stuff they've put on it? Later on in the day, Temen says, did you see that video? Wakuni says, I did, but it was pretty intense. Taman says, right? Did the people from class 5 really not realize someone was being targeted? Wakuni says, they must have known. Meanwhile, Shiori says to Manaka, you wanted to talk about the videos, right? Manaka says, yeah. Are you okay? Who was it that posted? Shiori says, it's okay. I'm the one who did it. I uploaded it from Nagumo's account. The next day, the students start blaming Yumi-chan, saying things like, how are you able to do those kind of things? That's just bullying. Wasn't Suzuki-san your best friend? You're the worst. The next day, Yumi-chan sees some people are commenting, the videos are fake. As she misses breakfast and as she leaves for school, she says, Mom, how disappointed will she be? In the principal's office, Aizawa says, looking from the footage, it seems like a hidden camera was placed in the classroom. I did try to look for it, but the camera must have already been recovered. The principal shouts, why did you ignore the situation until it got to this state? This is completely due to your failure as a teacher. Aizawa-sensei. Aizawa says, I have no excuse. If only I did as you said the other day and put in more effort to erase any evidence of the bullying. The principal says, shocked, what? I never. Meanwhile, Himekawa says, yelling, you're somewhere in here, right? Who uploaded that video to a public website? You guys are guilty too. You all pretended like you didn't see anything. Suzuki is… Nagao says, what? Don't put us in the same group as you guys who actually did things to her. As the other students say, you criminal. I can't believe you came to school. Just then, Aizawa calls out, Himekawa, I'd like to ask you about what happened yesterday. Himekawa says, what are you planning to ask about at this point? You already know everything about it, don't you? Wakuni says, really, what a foul mouth. As Chani says, her parents are former delinquents, so I guess it can't be helped. Wakuni says, it must be in her genes. Oh, I saw them at the parent-teacher interviews. She was a shady-looking lady. She really felt like a delinquent. It was really pathetic. You can't help but laugh. Himekawa gets angry. Stop it! Don't make fun of my mother. Just then, Aizawa holds her back saying, you're mad because they spoke badly of your parents? When you were targeting that girl, weren't you having fun? Making her feel anxious and inferior. Looking down on her so that you could feel a sense of superiority. It's because you were chasing that feeling of superiority that you've been backed into this corner you're in. You never thought about it, did you? That something like this would ever happen to you. As Shiori was passing in the hall, Yumi-chan calls out, hello. I never thought that this kind of thing would ever happen. I'm sorry, Shiori. Shiori says, Yumi-chan, the one who uploaded it to our class group chat was me. Somebody else uploaded it online, though. Yumi-chan says, why? I don't get it. Why did you? There are things that you can and can't do, aren't there? Shiori says, things you can do. Hey, Yumi-chan, were the things you did to me things that you can do? Yumi-chan says, it's not like I really wanted to do it, but I couldn't go against Nagumo and them. There wasn't any other way. I didn't do any of it because I wanted to. Shiori says, the video in the infirmary that had been saved. The one who told Nagumo about it was you, right? As Shiori recalls her conversation with Aizawa. It seemed like you were having fun while messaging them about it. Yumi-chan says, how did you know? As Shiori begins to walk, Yumi-chan says, what do you think is going to happen to me now? If it continued spreading like this, I won't be able to live a normal life, you know? Wasn't there any other way? Did you just want to punish me? Shiori says, that's right, I think I did want to punish you. Back with Yazaki, as she was sitting on the floor, she hears Nagumo at the door call out, Yazaki-sensei, you're there, right? Please open the door. Are you sure you won't open up? If you don't, I'll talk all about it. That you were having an affair with Suzuki, Shiori's father. Nagumo says, it's crazy, right? I can't imagine how many people have seen the video by now. Basically, I'm in a bad spot right now. And that's where you can help, sensei. In exchange for this picture. Yazaki says, I'll do it. Nagumo says, if this picture is spread around, you won't be able to continue at that school. Yazaki says, no, it's not about that. The thing I hated was his indifference. If I show him that picture, he can't help but be my partner, right? I don't care if I have to threaten him. I'll absolutely get him to return to my side. Then Nagumo says to Yazaki, for me to live a peaceful life again, I need your cooperation with some things. To put it simply, we need to frame Aizawa. Takahashi Riho's parents were banging on her door as her father said, that's enough, Riho. How long do you plan to stay locked up in your room? Mr. Riho says, I'm going to open the door, okay? As they enter, he says, Riho. Mrs. Riho says, your phone? What did you do? Takahashi says, it was noisy. It never stopped making noises. Everybody kept pressuring me, telling me to take responsibility by killing myself. Mr. Riho says, what are you? Riho says, I'm not safe even here. There's hidden cameras somewhere. Even now somebody's watching me, like they always have been. So I've been searching through my room. Mr. Riho says, wait, slow down. Explain it properly so we can understand. Mrs. Riho says, hey, Riho-chan, why did this happen to you? Riho says, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't. Meanwhile, Nagumo sees online people are reporting to the police and their full names are uploaded as well. As Nagumo goes to the bookstore to buy a book, the librarian says to Nagumo, that'll be 400 yen. As Nagumo was about to pay, she sees a boy looking at his phone and then at her. Nagumo freaks out and runs out of the shop thinking, are they staring at me? They must be talking about me on the net. Was it my imagination? Am I overthinking it? Meanwhile, as Mrs. Yanoda was in the market, she wishes her friends good evening. One of them says, how can you act like nothing's wrong? Even your daughter did those things. As she comes home, she asks her daughter Yumi, what is this? As Yumi looks shocked, her mother says, why did you do such things? Wasn't Shiori-chan your best friend? Yumi says, I didn't want to do it, but the other three forced me. Mrs. Yanoda says, that's not what it looked like to me. As she takes hold of Yumi's hand, she says, we're going to apologize. No matter how long you bow your head, it won't be enough. Even then Yumi yells out, let go, let go. If I had been born into a richer family, it wouldn't have come to this. Our family doesn't have much money. You're always saying that. I grew up always hearing that and lived with it. Of course, I'd get jealous of Shiori. If you haven't properly planned it out, don't have a child. Nagishi was in his room as he was watching Shiori's videos and recalled his time with Aizawa. Nagishi was planning on taking a serious step as he got tired of being targeted. As he was standing at the railing, seeing Aizawa, Nagishi says, Sensei, it's revenge. I wrote their names in there. The names of the ones who bullied me. I bet they'll be surprised. They must have never thought I'd actually come to this point. They'll remember me for the rest of their lives. Aizawa says, remember you? Nobody will remember you. Writing the bullies' names? That's not strong enough proof of their targeting you. They won't even get arrested. They'll just go back to their daily lives. Everyone will soon forget about you. Aizawa tears the letter Nagishi wrote and says, this kind of thing isn't revenge at all. So don't take a step that will make your family suffer forever. Nagishi says, crying. What the hell? You don't ever do anything. Even though you were my teacher at this point, what could you possibly do? Recalling the time, Nagishi thinks, but after that talk the other day, I'm sure of it. He had saved me, and probably this girl too. Back in school, Shiori was seated with Aizawa in front of the principal. The principal says, the student whose face was censored in that video, is it correct to assume that it was you, Suzuki-san? Shiori says, yes. The principal says, did you spread around that video as a form of revenge? Aizawa says, principal, it wasn't her. The source of that video, it came from one of the perpetrators, Nagumo's account. Most likely she accidentally posted the video to the wrong place. The principal says, Have you talked to Suzuki's parents about this? Aizawa says, actually, Suzuki's mother is currently hospitalized. In consideration of that, Suzuki herself has requested to not inform them until she's discharged. I will wait for the right moment and tell them personally. The principal thinks, what a mess. With this much proof on the table, it would be difficult to cover this incident. And to add to that, the bully's household is… Just then, Nagumo enters with her mother, Mrs. Assistant. Seeing them, the principal says, it's been a while, Nagumo. Mrs. I says, Principal, since the PTA meeting, wasn't it? The principal says, yes, it was. Anyways, what brings you here? Mrs. I goes over to Shiori and takes her hand saying, Suzuki-san, my child as well as you've both been through a lot. As Shiori watches them shocked, Nagumo comes over crying. I'm sorry, the whole time I was keeping that act up, it was really painful for me. Mrs. I says, my daughter's also a victim of her homeroom teacher, Aizawa sensei, along with the other students in that video. This man forced them into targeting her. The principal says, shocked, wait just a second. To go that far is… Aizawa also says, of course, those are groundless claims. Mrs. I says, Kayama Middle School. I've done my research. At that school that you worked at previously, it seems like a similar incident took place. The leaking video. The same thing happening twice. No matter how you put it. It's strange, isn't it? Maybe you also encouraged them into targeting. Aizawa says, for what reason would I do that? Mrs. I says, manipulating your students as you please. Maybe seeing that gets you off? You deviant. The principal says, shocked, wait, forcing them to target. Nagumo goes over to Shiori and says, Suzuki-san, I know it's hard to believe, but it was sensei that made me say those things. I never wanted to hurt one of my beloved friends. Just then, Aizawa gets a call from his landlord. As he was looking at his phone, Nagumo says, Sensei, couldn't you at least turn off your phone? Right now, we're talking about what you've done. Aizawa keeps his phone down, saying, my bad. Is this fine? Mrs. I says, Principal, as we speak, that video is continuing to spread. It's imperative that we get the truth out to the public as fast as possible. With that said, I demand that you immediately call the mass media for an emergency meeting to explain things. Aizawa's landlord was trying to call him as Yazaki was there, asking her to open his flat for her. The landlord says to Yazaki, like I thought, he's not picking up. Yazaki pleads, saying, I'm begging you, landlady. I'm worried about his well-being. The landlady says, but I can't just open his suite. The police should handle that kind of thing. Yazaki says, he hasn't come to work for 5 days now. Even though we just got engaged, he hasn't talked to me at all recently. When I think about what could have happened to him, the landlady says, well, you've told me exactly who you are and where to find you, if it's just this once. As Yazaki enters Aizawa's home, she says, thank you. Yazaki finds out about the videos. Meanwhile, in the school, the principal says, please wait, Nagumo-san, we haven't even confirmed that's the truth. Mrs. I says, this is an emergency, you know? Aizawa says to Mrs. I, education critic, Nagumo Kyuko, you worked as a high school teacher for 20 years before resigning. Now, you're a lecturer at Shirinen University, and you've written a few books on the side. In regards to the issue of bullying, you see it as a crime, and believe that it needs be met with severe punishment. I've always wanted to attend one of your lectures. Shiori screams out, just stop it. What are you talking about? It's a lie that she was forced to target me. All of them, by their own will. Aizawa says, Suzuki, go home for today. Shiori retorts, but sensei? Aizawa says, just leave it to me, all right? Mrs. I says, Aizawa sensei, it seems like you've done your research on me. You're right. I will never forgive targeting. To encourage it, as their homeroom teacher, who they should be able to trust, using your students as you please without dirtying your own hands, just what kind of despicable methods did you use to coerce my daughter? To make this kind-hearted girl do that, just what? Meanwhile, Nagumo thinks, that's good, old hag. Keep it up, just like that. Seeing Nagumo, Aizawa says, Nagumo, be careful, you're starting to smile. As Mrs. I says, what did you just say? Aizawa says, that's too bad. In regards to your ideology concerning targeting, there was a lot I agree with, but when it comes to your own daughter, it seems your judgment is clouded. Is there anything you can offer me? Any proof that I encouraged the targeting? Just then, Yazaki calls and tells Nagumo about the USB drive she found at Aizawa's apartment. Aizawa thinks, the call from my landlady. Yazaki was only here in the morning. Did she get my address from the faculty roster and convince my landlady to let her in? But why is she cooperating with Nagumo? The principal says, you instigated the targeting. That is the truth, isn't it? Meanwhile, as Nagumo comes out, she sees Shiori and says, it's all over now. Sensei admitted that he's the one that did it. Shiori says, no way. There's no way he'd accept that. Why did he? Mrs. I says, Suzuki-san, it's no wonder that you are confused. The homeroom teacher that you trusted was pulling the strings behind your back. It's a cruel betrayal of your faith in him. As Mrs. I hugs Shiori, she says, you poor thing. But you've got to open your eyes. The one you should hate isn't my daughter. At the press conference on Friday, the mass media will be coming in droves. I want you to make a testimony there. Tell them that my daughter didn't do anything wrong. say that she's also a victim just like you. Shiori says, do you really believe that, even after seeing that video? That your daughter wasn't doing that of her own will? You're the one that needs to open their eyes. As Shiori runs off, Nagumo thinks, with this, Aizawa's been taken care of. Now I've just got to find the right timing. When should I reveal it? The pictures of your beloved father's affair? The next day at school, Wakuni says, have you heard about Aizawa-sensei? Nagao says, that he's been suspended? Is he being held responsible for the targeting? Wakuni says, we're going to be fine, right? Nagao says, yeah, of course we are. It's not like we did anything. Himikawa says, that's hilarious. Nagumo says, right? He's a complete idiot. Just then the teacher tells the students to quiet down as the exam is going to begin. Back with Aizawa as he's home, he thinks, this is going slightly differently than how I thought it would. Well, this is also pretty interesting. Over at Shiori's home, Suzuki says, I'm going, Shiori. I'll be back a bit late today. Shiori says, okay, have a good day. As Suzuki was about to leave, the table phone gets a voicemail, so he listens to it. The voicemail is from Mrs. I, who says, I'm Nagumo I's mother. My daughter is in the same class as Shiori. Would it be too much to ask you to participate in the conference on Friday? I'm sure you have your own thoughts on the situation, but I strongly encourage you to come for yourself. It will surely shed some light on the turmoil regarding targeting at school. Have a good day. Suzuki calls out, Shiori, what does she mean by targeting? Recall of the event that happened 20 years ago. On Friday, at the mass media, the media asks, Principal, how do you plan on taking responsibility for this? Your school tried to hide the targeting, right? There's no mistaking it after hearing that recording. The principal says, no, that was just then. Aizawa comes over and says, of course, I will take responsibility for the things I've done, but I don't think I've done anything wrong. As the principal runs off, Mrs. I stops the mass leader and says, excuse me. The mass leader says, Nagumo, things have really taken an unexpected turn. Mrs. I says, please, could I ask you not to cover this incident, or at least change your report to protect my daughter? Of course, she shouldn't be completely forgiven, but for the sake of her future. The mass leader says, Nagumo, I can't do that. What happened here involves the general public. The actions that Aizawa-sensei's taken, and whether they were justifiable or not, the contents will change, but we're going to make sure to cover it. As Nagumo runs off, she thinks, why did it become like this? Everybody's useless. Just then, Yazaki catches her hand, saying, where are you going? I haven't gotten the picture yet. As Nagumo denies, Yazaki says, but the plan was. Nagumo says, that doesn't matter. Yazaki says, I did what you told me to do. Now you have to keep your promise. Now hurry up. Nagumo laughs, saying, you idiot. I wasn't planning on giving it to you from the start. Yazaki says, wait, don't mess with me. Nagumo says, you know you're not sane, right? You're trying to use the photo to threaten the person you're having an affair with into continuing your relationship. That's disgusting, you stalker. Yazaki says, shut up, just hand it over. Nagumo says, why should I? It's not just Suzuki. I also hate you. As Kaneda was passing by, he hears Yazaki yell, screw you! So he heads over to stop saying, Yazaki-sensei, what are you doing? Yazaki says, let me go. It's her fault. Nagumo says, that's hilarious. How old are you? Act your age, you old hag. As Nagumo walks off, Yazaki says, you damn brat. Meanwhile, in class, Shiori says, do you remember Yumi-chan? The day we were put in the same class? Yumi says, yeah, I remember it very well. Shiori says, that's good. We were so happy, we stayed out late chatting. We talked about joining the same committee and where we'd go on our way home. I was sure it was going to be a fun year. I don't regret uploading that video to the internet. At that time, I had no other choice, but because of it, your life has changed. More than I ever thought it would. For that, Yumi says, you did the right thing, Shiori. To be honest, I was scared to look at the video. I didn't want to believe that it was real. But yesterday, I finally watched the whole thing. I was laughing with such a horrible face. I didn't think at all about you or your state of mind. If that video hadn't been uploaded, you might really have seriously hurt yourself, like Sensei said. But I'm such a horrible person, I bet I would have said it wasn't my fault. Shiori hugs Yumi and says, I don't think that we can go back to being friends. I don't know how we should treat each other from now on. But at the very least, I want this to be the end of us hating each other. I forgive you. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Yumi says, Shiori, I'm glad you're still alive. Later, Nagumo meets Shiori and says, well, this is new. You've never asked me to meet you before. Shiori says, I've been wondering about the meaning behind what you said back in the classroom. Nagumo yells, you don't understand anything. Even though everything's our fault. Shiori says, what do you mean by that? Why do you despise me so much? It's not that you just hate me, right? What's the reason for? Nagumo says, reason? Yeah, there is one. Your father was having an affair with Yazaki-sensei. Seeing Shiori shocked, Nagumo says, oh, that's great. You didn't have a clue about it? That's the reason you became a regular in the basketball club. It's because you're the daughter of the person she was having an affair with. You didn't know anything and were just happy about it. What's with that? It makes me mad. Even though it was supposed to be me. Shiori yells, what the hell are you saying? There's no way I'd believe. Nagumo shows the picture saying, "This is your dad, right? They were happily going into a love hotel together, you know?" Shiori recalls her mother say, "I have something to say to Yazaki-sensei." Shiori thinks, then mom hurting herself and the bullying, it's all because dad. Nagumo says, "It's a real shock, isn't it? While you were being targeted, your father was happily getting it on in some hotel. The hand that would pat you on the head and praise you, it was probably still dirty from touching Yazaki's face." Nagumo says, "I'll give this to you. Make sure to ask your beloved father about it." As Nagumo comes home, she thinks, that feels good. The plan failed, but just seeing that face on Suzuki is good enough, and I don't plan on just having my life end like this. As Nagumo enters the hall, she calls out, "Mama, I'm thinking of studying abroad." As Nagumo enters the room, seeing her parents tensed, she asks, "Papa, what about the store?" Mr. I says, "Complaints just keep coming in. There was no way to get any business done. Studying abroad, we can't think about those kinds of things right now. Our address and the store's name have been exposed. We still haven't paid off the loan to the bank, you know?" Mrs. I says, "Even my standing at my workplace, I can't do speeches or teach lectures at university like I used to. I believed in you, Ai-chan. Why did you lie?" Nagumo says, "You're kidding me. If you call yourselves parents, figure it out. My name and face are all over the internet now. I can't live a proper life in this country. Do something to get the money and let me go abroad." Mrs. I says, "I'm sorry. I didn't raise you properly." Nagumo kowtows, saying, "Do something. I'm begging you." Back home with Shiori, as she enters, Suzuki says, scolding, "Shiori, where were you? You're so late, I was worried." Calming down, "What's wrong?" Shiori says, "I just went to see mom, that's it." Suzuki says, "I see. Anyways, I got sushi. Eat up. It's your favorite." Shiori heads to go upstairs saying, "I'm good." Suzuki comes over saying, "Wait up, Shiori. What happened? Talk to me." Shiori gets angry and says, "Don't touch me." As Shiori runs up to her room, Suzuki comes at her door and says, "Shiori, what happened? Come out of your room and talk to me." Next day during a talk show, the host says, "The next piece of news is regarding the video of targeting that has been spreading online. Yesterday, the school held an emergency meeting for the concerned parents of the students." Mass leader says, "That's right. The parents who came to the meeting wanted answers on how the school was handling the situation. However, the meeting took an unexpected turn. It was homeroom teacher A that threw the meeting off track. It seems that he had placed hidden cameras and was secretly monitoring his students. What's particularly surprising is this comment about unlimited access. It's shocking, isn't it?" The host says, "But he doesn't admit to uploading the video. Is that right?" Mass leader says, "Yes, that aspect is quite strange. Kawahara-san, what do you make of this?" Kawahara Kotoe, Umiya Women's College associate professor, says, "The quality of the staff is abysmal, including the principal. To not even give a chance for the students to reform themselves and abandon them. It seems to me that he just can't accept his own shortcomings. It's true that his perspective was very shocking." The host says, "By the way, did the actions against this teacher violate any laws?" Sumita Kazuhiro, lawyer, says, "Well, violation of the Personal Information Protection Law or the Minor Offenses Act or even the Anti-Nuisance Ordinance could possibly be brought up in court." Takeda, comedian, says, "He really is a piece of work, that teacher. Even rotten oranges." Sumita says, "But I don't completely disagree with the actions that teacher took. There are definitely places he went too far, but in order to decrease the amount of targeting, I believe that effective deterrence will be essential. His idea to increase the amount of security cameras throughout schools, do you all not agree that it's an interesting concept? If students know that people in charge are always watching." A lady guest says, "I'm against it. Shouldn't they be entitled to their privacy?" Sumita says, "I'm saying we'll take into consideration and build upon his." Just then, they get a cue for the next VTR. Mass leader says, "Well, then we have here an interview with one of the teacher's old students, who was a victim of targeting. Please have a look." Mass leader says to Negishi, "Don't worry, your face won't show on the broadcast." "Okay, are you ready?" Negishi says, "Yes." Mass leader says, "Then let's get started, Negishi-kun. The first thing I'd like to ask is, why did you agree to do this interview?" Negishi says, "I wanted to pay him back for what he's done for me." Mass leader says, "What he's done?" Negishi says, "Sensei, he gave me the hope to keep on living. When I was getting targeted, I left a note and almost took an irreversible step, but Sensei stopped me. He said that I couldn't get revenge that way. The next day, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside it was the proof of all the bullying I'd been through." Mass leader says, "Were you the one that uploaded it?" Negishi says, "Yes. I don't think that Sensei's way is perfect, but there's no denying that I was saved by what he did. Only those who have been targeted before would understand the hatred we have towards bullies. It won't go away with a few pretty words. That's what I want you to understand." Mass leader says, "Was revenge the hope that drove you to keep on living?" Negishi says, "At that moment in my life, it most definitely was. Of teenage and student irreversible steps, about a third of them have unknown cases. Mass leader says, within that third, how many do you think are related to targeting? People who, without telling anybody about their targeting and without leaving a note, took the irreversible step. I'm sure that explains some of those cases. Nagishi says, it takes a lot of courage to expose your weakness to others. Back at school, Mira says, according to the principal, he's not at school due to poor health. He's probably just hiding. Wakuni says, his whole I haven't slept thing was hilarious. Manaka thinks, I wonder what'll happen to Aizawa. He's definitely fired, right? Seeing Yumi, Mira says, Yoneda-san, you came to school today? I can't believe you came. Even though this victim, Suzuki-san, hasn't come back yet. Wakuni says, you really are the worst. Monica says, stop that. Haven't you guys learned anything yet? As they all leave, Monica gets a call from Suzuki. So he takes the class saying, Suzuki, I was worried since you weren't answering my calls. Are you okay? Shiori says, yeah, I'm fine. Monica says, all right, I saw it on the news. That interview with Aizawa's old student. His face wasn't shown, but that had to be Negishi-san. When we went to see him, it seemed like he wanted to forget everything that had happened to him. But when he found Aizawa was your teacher, I guess he decided to try to come to terms with his past. Shiori thinks, I see. That's why Negishi-san came to our school that day. Monica says, I don't know what to think anymore. I still don't think it's the right thing to do, taking revenge on the perpetrators. But in the end, that's only my opinion as an outsider. I don't understand all the pain you have to deal with. Suzuki-san, I wasn't thinking about you at… Shiori says, you're wrong. When I didn't have anybody I could call a friend, only you stayed by my side. You made sure to try and keep me company. You really saved me. Thank you, Monica says. Where are you right now? Shiori says, there's one more thing I've got to do now. I'm going to end it all. The next day, Shiori goes to meet Aizawa and says, sorry, sensei, here's all the proof of the targeting. I was only planning to return this to you, but I wanted to talk about what I'm going to do after this. Aizawa says, your mother, she's leaving the hospital today? About what you were saying? Shiori says, I've already made up my mind. I'll take my mother and leave that house. I'm planning to live with my mom's family for now. It's not that far, so I can go to school by train. Aizawa says, if you leave without telling your father, he's going to be worried, isn't he? Shiori says, so what? It's that guy's fault that mom took this step. And also why I was targeted. I had almost… Aizawa says, to make one of my students suffer this much, as a teacher, it makes me angry too. If anything happens with your father again, you can always count on me to help you. As Shiori leaves, Aizawa was about to walk away, but he spots Yazaki and says, where are you going, Yazaki-sensei? You've been following me since I got off the train, right? Yazaki tries to run, but Aizawa catches her saying, what were you trying to do? Don't tell me you were going to stab Suzuki's mother now. Yazaki says, no, I was just… After calling Nagumo over and over again, she finally said Suzuki-san had the picture. That's why Aizawa says, I don't know what picture you're talking about, but you should get over your obsession with that family. You don't even know what you're doing anymore, do you? Yazaki says, you're right. I know that what I'm doing is pointless, but I can't help the fact that I'm in love with him. Aizawa says, to be honest, I quite respected you. Out of everyone at the school, only you tried to do something about the targeting. When I said that there was no targeting in my class, you called me out for it. Well, I just wanted to keep the bullies where I could see them. That's why I hid the targeting at the time. Also, your desire to save Suzuki. You didn't feel that was just because you had ulterior motives, right? Yazaki says, I wonder. But since I met him, I've definitely become a very different person. Aizawa says, Suzuki Takuma. He's very good at working his way into people's hearts. It'll probably still take some time for Suzuki's mother to really be free of him. You should also try to stay away from him. Of course, that also means quitting your job at school. Yazaki says, you sound like you're familiar with him. Aizawa says, I am. He used to be my classmate. Back at Shiori's home, Suzuki gets a call. He says, what do you mean? Why is Shiori at her mother's old house? The person online says, she wouldn't tell us exactly why, just that she doesn't want to be in the same house as you. Sorry, I'm hanging up now. As the call disconnects, Suzuki thinks, why? She doesn't want to be in the same house? It's true she's been completely avoiding me these past few days, but why should she? Just then, Suzuki sees the news about the targeting and recalls when Mrs. I called and he asked Shiori, what did she mean by targeting? Then Suzuki thinks, no way. The targeting they were talking about has become this big of a deal? It couldn't be. There's no way. Shiori said she didn't have anything to do with it. There's no way she was targeting. No, wait, what if it was the other way around? Suzuki recalls when Shiori said, things aren't going that well at school right now. Suzuki thinks, was that a call for help? If it was, Suzuki sees Shiori's books all written with rude comments and gets shocked saying, I didn't realize my daughter was getting targeted. Of course I'd be hated. What kind of father wouldn't realize his daughter was asking for help? But then why? Why didn't the school contact me about it? Were they trying to hide it? Avoiding responsibility? Those fools. The brats that targeted her and those incompetent teachers, I'm going to kill them all. Back with Shiori, as she enters her mother's room, she says, Mama, I got you some barley tea. I'll place it here. As Shiori was using pep talk to cheer her, Mrs. Suzuki says, "Shiori, I'm sorry for always bothering you. I'm really sorry. Thank you for the barley tea." Just then, the doorbell rings, and on opening the door, Shiori's grandma sees it's Suzuki, who says, "Mother, please let me talk to Shiori." Grandma says, "Shiori doesn't seem like she wants to see you, though, and my daughter also won't tell me what's going on. What in the world happened?" Suzuki says, "About that." Just then, Shiori comes saying, "Grandma, let me talk to this guy in private." Seeing her grandma reluctant, Shiori says, "It's fine, just let me." Suzuki bows, saying, "Shiori, I'm really sorry. As your father, I'm really sorry that I didn't notice you were being bullied, even though you reached out to ask for my help. I'll make sure that both the bullies and the school that tried to cover it all up will suffer the proper repercussions. As your father, I will be the one to protect you, Shiori." Shiori smirks and says, "I don't want anything to do with you." Suzuki says, confused, "What do you mean?" Shiori shows him the videos of her targeting and says, "The one who actually protected me was the homeroom teacher who kindly collected all this evidence. Even though he himself is a victim, he went out of his way to protect me. And what did you even do for me? Oh, right. You straight up told me the one being targeted is at fault." Recalling his words, Suzuki says, "No, I just brought it up as an example of something that can happen. I didn't mean to say it applies to you or anything. The people who bullied you are clearly the ones at fault here. Social cliques that get together to unfairly criticize even the most insignificant thing." Shiori says, "Even the most insignificant thing, huh? What kind of thing do you think it was, huh?" Just then, Grandpa comes saying, "Are you okay, Shiori?" Shiori says, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm done talking to that guy." As Shiori goes back inside, Suzuki says, shocked, "What the hell? That guy? Why won't you call me Dad anymore?" The next day, Shiori came to school. Seeing her, Mira says, "We had no idea. We were under the impression that you and Nagumo got along well. I'm sorry I didn't notice that was really going on." Wakuni says, "Same here. Sorry." Nagao also says, "Me too." Shiori says, "No need to feel guilty if you didn't notice, right? If you are telling the truth, that is." As Shiori comes close to Yumi, everyone looks at them. Shiori goes over and says, "Good morning, Yumi-chan." Yumi hears Shiori and puts on a smile and says, "Morning." As Yumi was having her lunch, Manaka comes over. So she says, "Manaka-kun, thanks for the other day." Monica says, "Sure." Yumi-chan says, "But as things are now, I feel like I'm lying in a bed of nails. You know, I've said some pretty horrible things to my mom. Things like, if you don't have money, you shouldn't have had children. Blind to my own shortcomings, I took all the horrible things I had done and blamed them on my own mother. And yet, my mother said," Yumi recalls her conversation with her mother. Mrs. Yoneda says, "Listen, Yumi, the video will never disappear, but all it shows is what you've done yourself. Reality is painful and you may want to run away, but I, as your mother, won't allow you." Yumi says, "But you know." Mrs. Yoneda says, "Your mother will never ever abandon you, Yumi. We will carry this burden together. Even if people point fingers at you for the rest of your life, you have no choice but to accept it and live on." Back to present, Yumi says to Monica, "That's the promise I made with Mom." Just then she sees Aizawa and says, "Oh, it's Aizawa-sensei." Aizawa says, "Hey, that's rare, seeing you two together." Monica says, "Why are you at school?" Aizawa says, "To handle the transfer before my suspension from duty." Monica says, "Being in class is really weird now, you know? Everyone is constantly paranoid about Suzuki, anxious if she's going to say something. Is that what you were aiming for? Is that the kind of target-free classroom you wanted?" Aizawa says, "So you see how they are all bound by fear? Isn't that great? That way, nothing bad's going to happen anymore. What's the point of trying to preach morals to each bully individually? That sort of thing never works. As a teacher, I know that firsthand." Monica says, "Are you saying all students are bad people? You can't be serious. Just look at Yoneda here. She's been seriously reflecting on her actions." Aizawa says, "Precisely. Yoneda, for you to come forward on your own back there, I honestly didn't expect that at all. Same goes for you, Manaka-kun. The fact that you seem to want to help Suzuki, who was being isolated by the entire class, I couldn't fathom such a thing. I thought you had some ulterior motive for sure, but apparently I was wrong. I'm just a tiny bit jealous of Suzuki Shiori." As Manaka and Yumi look confused at Aizawa walking away, Aizawa thinks, "I really wished that people like you existed. People who offer a helping hand, uncaring of what others may think. People who confess their own sins and offer a tearful apology. Throughout the 20 years that passed since the events in that classroom, I wished for it. I wonder if classmates like them had been there. Would things have turned out differently? Or would—" Just then he sees Suzuki, storming towards the principal's office. As Suzuki was sitting in front of the principal, he says, "So let me recap. The school was trying to cover up the targeting, and that was done at the behest of the principal, who went into hiding until this all blows over. Is that right?" Principal says, "I wouldn't put it in terms of a cover-up. Suzuki says, "Don't fool with me. Why did you never even try to contact me? Even though I'm her guardian? We haven't even received so much as an apology from the perpetrators." Suzuki thinks, "If I don't play my role as a father here, I may lose my connection to Shiori forever." Suzuki says, "Do you even understand the amount of pain you have inflicted on my daughter's heart?" The principal says, "We are truly sorry. Be assured that we are taking this matter seriously." Suzuki gets angry as he says, "Are you trying to make a fool of me?" The principal says, "No, sir, of course not. The responsible homeroom teacher will be here shortly." Suzuki says, "I heard it from my daughter. The homeroom teacher collected evidence of the targeting. I have nothing but gratitude for him. If you, as a school, are trying to pin the blame on that homeroom teacher, in my role as a father, I can never forgive you." Just then, the principal says, "Ah, here you are, Aizawa-sensei. Mrs. Suzuki's father is waiting for you." As Aizawa enters, he says to Suzuki, "You say you have nothing but gratitude for me? That's preposterous coming from you, Mr. Suzuki." Suzuki gets shocked as he thinks, "You? Why are you here? No way." As Aizawa says, "Pleased to meet you. I am Aizawa Yuichi, the homeroom teacher." Suzuki says, "What the hell are you talking about?" Aizawa says, "Is that what you wanted to say?" Suzuki says, "You're Shiori's homeroom teacher?" Aizawa says, "Yes, please have a seat." Seeing Suzuki is shocked, Aizawa says, "Not gonna sit down?" As Suzuki thinks, "There's no way he is. It can't be." Then Suzuki recalls their first conversation he had on the phone. Suzuki thinks, the man on the phone back then was him? He's not showing the slightest hint of surprise and he's pretending to meet me for the first time. Did he already know? Suzuki recalled when Aizawa said, "Could you say the same thing if someone you loved was being targeted?" Suzuki thinks, even back when he said that too, he knew I was her father and did that on purpose. I don't understand. If he knew she was my daughter, why did he save her? Even though I almost pushed him to take the irreversible step. If I was in his place, I wouldn't mind letting her die knowing who her father was. Then Suzuki looks at the box Aizawa brought and says, "Hey, what the hell is in that box?" Aizawa says, opening the box, "Oh, this? It's not very pleasant to look at," but seeing Suzuki shocked, "Just what did you think would be in there? Maybe you've been watching too many horror movies? As you can plainly see, your daughter has been enduring some horrible targeting. As her teacher, I think she is completely blameless. How about you as her father? Do you have any idea why she might have deserved this?" Suzuki gets shocked as he grabs Aizawa's collar and says, "Aizawa!" Principal says, "What are you saying, Aizawa? Please apologize to her father immediately." Suzuki says, "Hey, is there anywhere we can talk privately?" Aizawa says, "Of course." Suzuki, "I know just the place." Suzuki says, "I would have never expected to meet again like this. Was it really coincidence that you became her teacher?" Aizawa says, "Of course it was. This is a public school. It's not like you get to choose where you're sent." Suzuki says, "Still, I can't believe you're a teacher, considering you couldn't even graduate middle school properly. Why did you save my daughter? I just can't stand it. What the hell is your angle? Even though Aizawa says, "Even though you relentlessly targeted me like that, I discovered someone was being targeted in my class. As a teacher, I couldn't just let it pass. At least that's what I'd want to say. But it wasn't that simple. Shortly after I was assigned here, I started noticing Suzuki Shiori's things kept disappearing, and I could make a pretty good guess as to who was responsible. I started looking into their relationship immediately. Their friends, their families. I went all the way, and a name I could never forget stared back at me from the page. It must be a coincidence. That's what I would have preferred. But things didn't work out that way, of course. A student is in need of help, and she is his daughter. She's nothing like her father. I kept telling myself that. I started gathering evidence of her targeting, preparing a plan to save her, but seeing her suffer like that made me feel good at times, like I was finally striking back at her father. I loathed myself for that. I couldn't separate the two of you in my head. I kept looking at Suzuki Shiori and seeing her father instead. But as I kept watching her, I realized she's no different from any other student. She's strong, but also sensitive and weak at times, a completely ordinary 15-year-old girl. After that, I realized that I finally stopped seeing any trace of you in her. She grew up as a kind kid that knows what suffering feels like. And her father, you should be happy that she doesn't resemble you in the slightest. Suzuki says, "You sure have grown, huh, Aizawa? No matter how you're trying to patch things up, I know who you really are. You were thinking back on it in the hallway, weren't you? That stuff from 20 years ago, you haven't changed at all. You're still that cowardly target kid from back then?" Aizawa says, "I guess that goes for both of us. You also haven't grown a single bit since then and stayed the same bully you've always been." Suzuki pins Aizawa to the ground and says, "So what now? What, did you want to hear me apologize? Don't make me laugh. If you'd told me about the targeting sooner, this whole mess would have been avoided. I'm her father. She's my daughter and—" Aizawa says, "You could have saved her? Come on now. You're not that kind of guy, are you?" Aizawa plays a recording he took of Suzuki saying, "Those who get targeted are unable to fit into society. They just can't adapt to their surroundings. There's no way I could love someone so defective." Then Aizawa says, "So, how did it feel? When you found out your daughter was being targeted, were you disappointed in her turning out to be defective? Suzuki was about to punch Aizawa as he says, I'm not falling for it. We're talking about you. I'm betting you must have set up hidden cameras around this room. Aizawa says, no, I don't need stuff like that now. Suzuki says, I wonder. So, after covertly recording me like that, did seeing my look of surprise feel good, Aizawa? You're pathetic. Today just made me realize anew that people like you are made to be targeted, unlike Shiori. She is nothing like you at all. There's no reason why she should be targeted. It must be something like envy because of how good she is. Just some petty reason, some pretext for people to justify their targeting. Aizawa says, some pretext? You might be right. After all, the reason she's being targeted is your affair. Suzuki says, shocked. What did you say? Aizawa says, apparently that girl thought that Yazaki, the teacher you're having an affair with, was giving your daughter special treatment. Suzuki says, shocked. It can't be. Something that unreasonable? Aizawa says, her targeting, her mother's fatal attempt, they were all caused by you. And she already knows this. Suzuki thinks, is that why she said that yesterday? It can't be, my own daughter. Aizawa says, targeting is mostly like that. Like you said, nothing but petty reasons or flimsy pretexts. It doesn't matter what causes it, you were the same after all. Try to remember Suzuki Shinji. Suzuki says, what do you mean, Aizawa? Aizawa says, you can't remember? You told me yourself, didn't you? The reason why you were targeting me in the first place. It was a hot summer day, just like this one. Flashback to the day. Aizawa says, please, no more. Suzuki says, what? This is all your fault in the first place. You ratted us out to the teacher. Aizawa says, wait, no, I did not. The teacher did ask me about you guys, but I didn't say anything. Please believe me. Okane says, the help? You need to actually deny the stuff, not just stay silent. Mikami said, silence is as good as saying yes, dude. Suzuki says, so there you have it. It's all your fault. As Suzuki and the others were targeting Aizawa, he thinks, how long? Just how much longer will I have to endure this? Maybe until I die? Suzuki says, I'm tired of this. Mikami says, wanna go sing? The karaoke place is super cheap right now. Aizawa says, Suzuki, why are you doing this to me? Did I do something wrong? Do you have some other reason for it? Suzuki says, a reason? Wait, what was it again? I'm sure there was something. I remember now. Because of you, I couldn't get that game I wanted. Dad told me if I got first place in our physics test, he'd buy it for me. But you got first place instead. Terrible, isn't it? That's why I decided you'd entertain me as my new game instead. A game in which I get to beat the hell out of you. Back to present. Aizawa says, that's what you said. You don't remember? How about when we played target practice then? You just loved using me as a target back then, didn't you? You had a good throwing arm, so you managed to hit the bullseye so many times. I got 2 broken teeth from that. Getting them treated wasn't easy. Seeing Suzuki's confused face, Aizawa shows his scars on his arm and says, you don't remember that either. How about this then? These wounds you inflicted on me. That sure hurt too, or maybe these scars from when you hurt me after catching me in tag. I did my best to run, but Suzuki gets angry and says, are you done with that yet? It's been 20 damn years. So what? You expect me to remember every little scratch you got in your life? Aizawa says, I guess not. Those on the bullying side can forget what they've done so easily. But you know, Suzuki, the ones that get targeted can't do that. It doesn't matter how many years pass. The pain, the humiliation, it never fades. Before, you said that your daughter's targeting must have started for some petty, absurd reason, just like the one you gave me back then. Just tell me, if the targeting suffered by your daughter is petty and senseless, then how is what you did any different? Just tell me. That targeting 20 years ago, was it my fault? If you don't think like that anymore, then for everything you've done 20 years ago, apologize to me. Suzuki says, apologize? And what, that'll fix you? Aizawa says, I don't know, but this is a chance for you too. It might be your last chance for you to change yourself as a person. Suzuki says, so? Aizawa, there's absolutely no reason for me to apologize. Every single instance of violence in your stories is pretty much testimony of a crime. But that was back then. It's been years, and there's absolutely no proof that I did any of that. It's completely different from the situation those students targeting Shiori are in. So, tell me, am I guilty of anything at the present time? The law has already let me slip away, so what reason would I have to apologize? Aizawa, you've lived your life incorrectly. You should have used those experiences as a springboard and faced forward to live your own life. It's been 20 years, you know? Those kids that targeted you are all living happy lives. They made their own families, found jobs to dedicate themselves to. Of course, that includes me. In other words, why would I change anything about that? Aizawa says, but aren't you about to lose your daughter? Suzuki says, I'll admit I was shaken by it, but you don't get it at all. You don't know how strong the bond between a parent and child can be. It doesn't break that easily. That is family. And I'm sure Shiori wants to believe in her dad no matter what too. I'll just tell her that teacher was stalking me and make her out to be crazy, and I'll get out of this completely clean. Just then, Suzuki gets a call, so he says, I have a job to do. Unlike you, soon enough. Aizawa says, it wasn't easy to get comfortable when sitting on the chemistry lab's stool, was it? Seeing Suzuki confused, Aizawa says, it's because in the event of an accident, you should be able to easily run away in any direction, since there's no backrest in your way. From this moment forward, you won't be given a single moment in peace. Just like in the middle of a dangerous experiment, you'll have to live on full alert all the time. I'll keep pushing you until I've taken everything you've got to give, no matter how far you run. Suzuki says, interesting. Aizawa, what can you even do alone? Well, good luck with that, I guess. Saying so, Suzuki leaves. As Aizawa comes out, he thinks, I'm honestly surprised. Being able to earnestly love someone, I would have never expected you to be able to feel something like that. But that's why I knew I had to take it away from you. As Suzuki enters the next room, he says, sorry for the wait. Aizawa had sent a text message to Shiori to meet in the chemistry preparation room. As Shiori arrived at school, she got a text from Aizawa telling her to meet in the science prep room. As she entered, she thinks, Sensei's late, 6th period's going to start soon. Just then she hears her father Suzuki's and Aizawa's voices from the chemistry lab next door. As Aizawa enters the room, he says, it's just as you've heard. I've been targeted by your father. These wounds were all inflicted by him. Aizawa bows and says, I'm sorry. Shiori says, why are you apologizing, Sensei? Aizawa says, what your father said was right. I didn't think of you as an innocent victim from the start. The fact that you were his daughter is something I couldn't get out of my mind. I should have stepped in to help you sooner. If I hadn't been slow, then that infirmary video could have been avoided. My own past history should have no bearing on you. I was in the wrong. I'm sorry. Shiori says, you don't need to apologize. As she holds Aizawa's arm with care, after you suffered so much, it is no surprise that you'd hold a grudge against me, your abuser's daughter. And yet you still came to my rescue. Shiori began to cry as she said, it must have been so hard on you. I'm sorry. It was my father who messed up your life. Aizawa says, while trying to protect you, I had conflicting feelings. I wanted to take my revenge on Suzuki Shinji. This could have led to your family breaking apart, and in that case you could have sunk deeper into an even deeper hell. Shiori says, did you let me listen into your conversation to make your revenge known? Whether my father is taken away from me or not. Just then, Shiori gets a voicemail from Suzuki, in which he says, Shiori, please give me another chance. This was all a misunderstanding, Shiori. It was a one-sided thing from that woman. I would never have an affair. And your homeroom teacher, you can't trust that guy. He pretended to want to save you, but actually he must have been scheming too. Today was my first time seeing him, but he was obviously just pretending to worry about your situation. Shiori disconnects the call and says, Sensei, there's no need to ask for my approval, because I already have no father. Aizawa says, I see. The next day, Suzuki goes to meet Yazaki. As Suzuki rings Yazaki's doorbell, he thinks, to be honest, I have no idea if this will help, but I have no other choice. As Yazaki opens the door, she says, shocked, Suzuki-san? Suzuki bows and says, I'm sorry. It was deplorable of me to break up with you in such a terrible way. He removes an envelope from his coat pocket. There's 500,000 yen inside. Please accept it. Yazaki says, so this is a settlement? Suzuki says, yes, and there's one more thing. My daughter, she won't listen to a word that I say. So, could you please tell her something on my behalf? Please tell her. I loved him one-sidedly, so I kept clinging to him. As a result, his wife misunderstood, which drove her to take that drastic step. Yazaki says, are you serious? Suzuki says, I know it is an unreasonable request, but you don't want her to be unhappy, do you? She was a student in your club after all. A student you cared about deeply. That child needs a father. As he lifts his hand and embraces Yazaki, I implore you, please fulfill this last request for the man you once loved. Yazaki says, let me think about it. I'll give you my answer later today. Suzuki says, thank you. Today the director from the main branch is coming, so I might be a little later than usual. Yazaki says, from the main branch? Suzuki says, I'll be moving to the main branch next month. Before I do, the director wanted to meet with me face-to-face at least once to discuss the next steps. Yazaki says, oh, wow, it's a promotion, isn't it? Congratulations. Over at the bank, the director says, the matter with the loan to Misawa Iron Corporation, you resolved it splendidly. Suzuki says, I'm not deserving of such praise. It's all thanks to my excellent subordinates. The director says, laughing, you're more modest than I thought. Out of 1,000 people joining our company in a given year, only about 50 make it to section chief. And among these, the head sales department is the most coveted and prestigious position. I'm looking forward to working with you, Chief Suzuki. Suzuki gets and bows as he says, I'll do my very best to meet your expectations to the fullest. Then Suzuki thinks, I'll curry up favor with this guy and climb the corporate ladder to get a position in the board of directors. As Suzuki comes out, he thinks, the only problem left is Shiori. If she believes that guy's story, then Just then, the receptionist calls Suzuki saying, "Excuse me, there's a woman making a ruckus in the ground floor lobby. She's calling for Mr. Suzuki." As Suzuki was going down to the lobby, he thinks, a woman? Maybe one of the clients? As he reaches the lobby, he sees it's Yazaki. On seeing Suzuki, Yazaki says, "Finally, you're here. How can you be so cruel, Suzuki?" Suddenly slamming down 500,000 yen, she throws the money into the air. "And demanding I abort our child. You said you'd divorce your wife, isn't that right?" Suzuki looks shocked as he thinks, "Child? Divorce? What the hell is she saying?" Then he sees his staff members chattering. So Suzuki quickly says, "Are you perhaps mistaking me for someone else? Anyways, let's take this matter outside." Yazaki says, "What? No way. After finding out you were cheating, your wife harmed herself, and at that time, didn't you take me to a love hotel, you fool?" The staff members chatter. Harmed herself? Suzuki-san's wife did? For real. Just then, Yazaki says, "I'm done with this. I've had enough of your heartlessness." Then, Yazaki leans closer to Suzuki and says, "This is my answer." Then, as Yazaki leaves, he says to everyone, "Please calm down, everyone. I have no idea what that nonsense was all about. I've never even spoken to that woman before. Actually, I've had a stalker that had been harassing me for a while. To think it'd escalate." Just then, the copy machine starts printing out a photo, and on seeing that, Suzuki says, "What is that?" On seeing the photo of him with Yazaki, the director comes forward and says, "Where the hell did this come from?" Suzuki begins to collect the photos and says, "Wait, don't look. I can explain." The director says, "Explain what?" "It's plain as day you're taking the mistress to a hotel." Then he turns around and says, "Valued customer, apologies for this commotion." Suzuki calls out, "Director, sir?" The director says, "I am going back to the main branch office." Suzuki calls out, "Please wait. Someone's trying to frame me." The director says, "Enough. Someone putting such disgusting behavior to light is the last thing we want in our establishment." What an idiot. As a bank, you should know there's no coming back for a loser. As Suzuki comes out of the office, he thinks, "A loser? Me? A loser?" Then he calls Yazaki, but her phone is not reachable, so he gets angry and thinks, "That stupid woman?" Lately, it felt like things were falling apart out of control, but I never would have thought that even my workplace could have been affected. Was that fax also his doing? But how? He recalls his office call. Is Sanmaru Bank employing someone with such a violent past? Suzuki Shinji is a criminal. Over at the bank, Suzuki goes to meet the branch manager and says, "Please hear me out, sir. It's all slander. I have absolutely no recollection of having bullied someone 20 years ago. There isn't a single piece of evidence that I did something like that." Branch manager says, "You have a point. Those phone calls are probably just an unfunny prank." Suzuki thinks, finally, a reasonable reaction. After all, who wants to raise trouble about something that happened 20 years ago? The branch manager says, "There's no reason to pin any blame on you." As his expression changes, "Is that what you thought I would say? Do you expect me to trust you after what happened yesterday?" Branch manager gets up banging his hands on the desk saying, "You embarrassed me in front of the director. Don't you realize that I'll be held responsible for this blunder? It's a shame. Although you were a little aggressive, you were producing good results, but this one time I cannot cover for you." Suzuki says, pleading, "Please, sir, I'll do anything." The branch manager says, "Get out." As Suzuki comes out, he recalls Aizawa said, "I'll destroy everything you've ever achieved. I'll chase you to the depths of hell." As Suzuki was getting angry and thinks, "Aizawa, is this what you were plotting behind the scenes?" As he enters the hallway, Ono says, "This is the teacher." Tengen says, "Yeah, apparently it's the guy Suzuki targeted in the past." Suzuki comes over and takes the phone saying, "Give me that phone." Suzuki thinks, what? Aizawa's releasing videos showing his scars. Is this footage from a parent-teacher conference? This sort of thing got leaked? Son of a gun. He even made sure to get a good angle on his scars on camera. Tengen says, "You know, in the comment section, somebody's posted your name and workplace address. That video is even hurting our business." Yabuki says, "What a pain in the head." Suzuki says, "Yabuki, watch it. Show some respect." Yabuki says, "Respect? To whom? There's no point in sucking up to you anymore. Your career is done for." As Suzuki grabs Yabuki's collar, he says, "Whoa, resorting to violence now. If you do that, it's really over for you, you know?" Yabuki pushes Suzuki's hand and frees himself from Suzuki. After leaving the bank, Suzuki goes to the cafe. As he was seated, he sees a familiar person come over and say, "Excuse me, one iced coffee, please." As he comes over to Suzuki and takes a seat, Suzuki says, "Satake, it's rare that you call me. We haven't seen each other since what, the school reunion?" Satake says, "Yeah. Anyway, Suzuki, things have gotten out of hand. Any ideas how to fix this?" Suzuki says, "How should I know? I'm no celebrity. I'm just an office worker. Why am I being blamed so much?" Satake says, "The gossip shows are still going on about Aizawa. This is no longer just about school children targeting. Showing those scars has made quite an impact, and we're being dragged out into the mess. The celebrities are on their side. Luckily, my name hasn't been exposed yet, but the other day Aizawa showed up at my house. No idea how he figured out my home address, but to be honest, I'm afraid. What if he hurts my kids? Satake says, "Hey Suzuki, that fool has crossed a line. Don't you think it's time we put him back in his place? Just like in middle school, threatening to beat him up made him shut up for good. We'll use the same trick again this time. You know I run a store over in Kabukicho, right? I know some guys over there who are pros at solving these sorts of problems. They're into that sort of business. We'll need to pay some money up front, of course, but if those guys are involved, they'll get Aizawa to stop screwing around for sure." Suzuki says, "Sorry, but it's too risky for me. Anyway, there's no proof of anything. Things are going to quiet down soon enough. Besides, unlike you, I have a respectable job." Satake gets up, paying for the coffee, and says, "Well, I'm still going through with it. If you change your mind, let me know." The next day, as he enters the bank, he thinks, "I can still make a comeback. After all, I've put a lot of hard work into the company. I'm an indispensable employee." As Suzuki enters, he says, "Good morning." Suzuki goes over to Karuba and asks, "How did the viewing of Sakura Apartments go?" Karuba says, "Why is it always us? How about you put in some legwork for a change?" Suzuki gets shocked as Karuba never spoke in front of him like that. Roku says, "Always bossing people around. I bet you think you got to your position on your own merit." Just then, Suzuki sees the branch manager and calls out, "Branch manager, sir," about the loan to Kunin Foods Corporation. Branch manager says, "I've given that job to Yabuki. Your job now is to make copies of documents all day." On hearing this, Suzuki thinks, "All the things I built up came crumbling down so easily. Day after day, I only got menial jobs." After a few days, he hears Roku say to Yabuki, "Excellent work, Yabuki." The next day, as Suzuki was to enter the bank, he looks at the board and says, "I no longer belong to this place. I'm afraid to go to work." Suzuki has a flashback of a previous client. Nomura says, "I'm truly very sorry. I will be sure to repay you next month, including interest." Suzuki says, "After I interrupted my busy work schedule to come here, you're telling me to walk out empty-handed? I told you before, didn't I? Back then, we turned down your request for an additional 120 million loan. You said you'd have to close down the factory. It's due to this increased risk of the debt going bad that we are demanding our assets back right away. But if you still insist on delaying even further, then get down on your knees and beg." Nomura does and says, "I beg you, please let me have one more month. Next month, once the payment from our trading partner arrives." Suddenly, Suzuki says, "I changed my mind. Pay it back right now, you fool. Face the facts. Your company is done for. Every time it's just empty promises. Who do you take me for?" Just then, a little girl comes and says, "Papa, what's going on?" Nomura says, "Megumi, I'm busy with work, so please step out." Suzuki says, "Did you know, little girl? Your father's a dirty thief." Nomura calls out, "Hey!" Suzuki says, "He took a loan and refuses to pay it back." "Oh, you poor, poor thing. It must be horrible to have that criminal's blood running through your veins." As Megumi runs out, Nomura calls out angrily, "Suzuki, why did you do that?" Suzuki says, "I value family. The likes of you should finish off. If you can make it look like an accident, you can get some insurance money from it. Then they'll be free of this dirty factory. That'll be a big relief for your wife and daughter. Drowning in debts and without a future. Who wants a father like that? What's the point of your existence? Aren't I right? We have a mortgage on both the land and the house. Getting our money back will be smooth sailing. So why don't you just off yourself already?" Back to present, Suzuki was watching the daily news. As the anchor says, "Are mistakes made in the past unforgivable for an entire lifetime?" The guest says, "That is one extreme argument, if the perpetrators show no remorse." Just then, Suzuki sees he's got a voicemail and he hears his doorbell. So he goes to open and sees it's his wife, so he happily says, "You came back, I was so sad. When you're not around, I feel so empty. This past month and a half made me realize that. Let's go back to being a happy family." Mrs. Suzuki hands over the divorce form and says, bowing, "Let's file for divorce, please." Suzuki gets shocked as he says, "Hold on, divorce. What are you saying all of a sudden?" Then Suzuki calms down and says, "Hey, listen, I'm a new man now." Suzuki bows, saying, "I feel really bad for betraying you. Please give me another chance." Mrs. Suzuki says, "Just like you'd hit me. You always use the same lame old apology. I'm sorry, I lost my temper. The truth is, I love you from the bottom of my heart. All lies you'd tell to keep me under your thumb." Suzuki says, "Lies? I'd never. I really." Mrs. Suzuki says, "That's enough. While I was in the hospital, you never once showed your face. I was so focused on not wanting you to hate me that I acted excessively harsh towards Shiori. By praising her to be the ideal daughter you wanted, I thought it would make you think of me as well. I've been a terrible mother. I didn't even notice that my own daughter was being targeted. Maybe it's too late now, but still, I want to be a mother for her. I want to do my very best to raise her, which is why I'm asking you to please let us be. Leave us behind?" Suzuki says, "I should leave you? If there's anyone here who's got to leave, then it's you. Shiori belongs to me. You only had her because you wanted to trap me in this marriage. You don't even have a speck of love for my daughter." Mrs. Suzuki retaliates, saying, "That's not true. My own child, who I've gone through pains to carry in my body, How could I not love her? Suzuki grabs Mrs. Suzuki's neck and says, how are you even planning to raise Shiori? You're disgusting. I feel like puking. You haven't worked a single day in your entire life. Were you hoping to mooch off some rich guy after spreading your arms open for him? That's the only thing you're good for. As Suzuki releases his wife, she falls to the ground. Suzuki says, we aren't divorcing. The three of us will live together as a family. Go cool your head. Did your mom put you up to this or what? Mrs. Suzuki says, no, it was Aizawa-sensei. Suzuki says, shocked, what did you just say now? Mrs. Suzuki says, Aizawa-sensei. He gave me a lot of advice. Suzuki thinks, Aizawa? You even got to my wife? Mrs. Suzuki says, he gave Shiori's future serious consideration, mom and daughter. He said the two of us should try to start afresh. That's why. Suzuki gets angry and says, enough, get out of my house now. Mrs. Suzuki says, I'll leave the divorce papers here, and leaves. Suzuki plays the voicemail he got and gets shocked, as Aizawa says, this is Aizawa. Well, Suzuki-kun, how do you feel now? Now you are the target, being hit by society's blows. Suzuki thinks, target? And recalls targeting Aizawa. Then Aizawa says, like a digital tattoo, your name will forever be etched in the internet. How does it feel? Suzuki recalls the scar he made on Aizawa's arm. Aizawa says, abandoned by the people around you. Just like I was back then, you are now all alone. As Suzuki throws the phone, he says to himself, me? All alone? How wrong you are. Suzuki makes a call to Satake and says, Satake, it's me. About that talk we had earlier. I'll go along with it after all. Satake says, got it. Actually, I was just now telling the guys about the matter with Aizawa. I'll put you on speaker. Tell them what you want, Suzuki. Suzuki says, Aizawa ruined my life. Make him pay. Put him in a world of hurt. No, wait. Too simple. Not enough. Finish Aizawa. Not instantly, of course. Do it slowly, painfully. Make him regret all that he's done. I have money. Show me proof you finished him. And then, on the other side with Sadek, he says as Takano was seated, there you have it. I sent this recording to San Maru Bank. Then, as Sadake gets up, he says to Aizawa, we did our part. Are you satisfied now? Aizawa says, yeah. As Aizawa was about to leave, Takano says, wait, Aizawa-kun, we really regret doing all those things 20 years ago. That's why we cooperated by writing those internet posts and making complaints to the bank, so you'll hold up your end of the deal, right? You won't publicly accuse us, will you? Aizawa says, of course, Takano-san, just as we agreed. Like I said back at the alumni meeting, I don't hold a grudge against you. Thank you for helping out. As Aizawa was busy doing something, Satake says, Suzuki's really done it now. He'd even order a hit on someone. Damn, that arrogant tone of his always pissed me off. Kinda glad it's come to this. As Aizawa places a pen in Satake's jacket, Takano says, I know, right? Acting high and mighty just because he was ranking in a bunch of cash. Who in this day and age goes to problem solvers anyway? As Satake sees Aizawa has left, he says, by the way, Takano, are you really remorseful? Takano says, no, why should I? That creep deserved it. Satake says, you snake, you. Takano says, as she strips, if there's one thing I should thank Aizawa for though, it's for making the alumni meeting happen. Satake says, well then, I'm glad I could get back with you like this. Your husband isn't satisfying you, is he? Over on the other side, Aizawa is watching them as Takano says, no, but I'm still on good terms with him. The kids are super cute too. Then, as he posts the video of Takano and Satake, he looks at the list of his bullies and says, sorry, but I don't intend to forgive anyone. Meanwhile, over at the bank, Kibi says, did you hear the news about Suzuki? Oyama says, yeah, I did. In the branch manager's office, branch manager says, you're fired. Are the rumors about the recording true? The one about you putting a hit on someone? As Suzuki doesn't say a word, branch manager says, well, I don't know. It was so bad that upper management did all they could to cover it up. What are you going to do from now on? As Suzuki leaves the office, he recalls the branch manager saying, you won't be able to land a proper job anymore. Meanwhile, as Shiori is ready to leave for school, she says, I'm off. Mrs. Suzuki says, I'll come pick you up when you're done. As Shiori says, okay. Mrs. Suzuki says, just a little more and summer courses are over. Hang on tight. Suzuki watches as Shiori was ready to leave for school. He tries to call back thinking, Shiori, Papa lost everything. Please, I only want you by my side. Just then, he looks at himself in the roadside mirror and is shocked to what he looks like now, compared to what he used to look like when he used to drop Shiori before. So Suzuki stops and lets Shiori leave. Then, as Suzuki's phone rings, he sees it's a number. Suzuki thinks, I have nothing left. Nothing left to lose. You see, Aizawa, that's why I have nothing to fear. You're the one who made me like this. Suzuki says, you took everything from me. I have nothing anymore. I can't go back to how it was before. As he drives his car towards the place Aizawa called. Seeing Aizawa standing there, he presses on the accelerator and says, no more. I'll finish you, Aizawa. But Aizawa calls out, oh, it's Suzuki-kun. Something wrong? Why don't you get out of the car, yes? At first, Suzuki presses the accelerator but then stops and gets out of his car and says, "It's interesting. I didn't expect you would call me to this place." Aizawa says, "Hardly anybody passes by here. That's why you used to bring me here to target me. So you know Yazaki-sensei decided to come back? Surely she'll be starting over again." "Oh, don't worry, it turned out she wasn't pregnant." Suzuki gets angry as he thinks, "So you were behind all that as well." Aizawa says, "Well, what's the reason you called me here for?" Suzuki says, "Isn't it obvious? 'Cause I'm going to finish you, Aizawa. I didn't think you'd be able to reach this point. Why? You took everything from me. Why am I the one being punished? Aren't there hundreds of people out living their lives without repenting for what they did in the past? Why me?" Aizawa says, "You had your chance. When we talked in the science room, your daughter was in the next room. It's said that Shiori Suzuki ended up accepting the apology of her best friend Yumi Yonoda. If in that room you had recognized you did me wrong as kids, you might still have your daughter by your side. Suzuki, you ruined that chance yourself alone." Suzuki gets angry and says, "Knowing my daughter was in the next room, you dared to." Aizawa says, "Yes, you thought I was that much of a fool. You seriously thought I would believe you had changed?" Suzuki punches Aizawa and says, "I underestimated you." As he hits him, Suzuki says, "This won't end halfway like when we were in high school. After all, I have nothing left to lose. I'm not afraid of finishing you here and now." Aizawa says, "I see. It'll never be enough for you. You want her to be targeted and hurt again?" As Aizawa gets up, he says, "Think about it. How you think they'll see her? The daughter of a killer. Do you have any idea how they're gonna treat her? Well, I don't think it'll come to that. You don't have the courage to get your hands dirty. Just a while ago, you didn't have the guts to run me over with the car, isn't it? During third year, you were convinced you were king. In your head, everyone followed you and obeyed your orders. But you couldn't have been more wrong. Actually, you were nothing but a pathetic boy pretending to be something you weren't. We're done, right? I'll be leaving first, bye." As Aizawa was walking away, Suzuki recalls how Aizawa would plead back then. And then he says to himself, "Who do you think? Who the hell do you think you are?" Suzuki gets in his car and races off behind Aizawa and says to himself, "You think I won't do it? I will finish you. I'll finish you." Just then, Suzuki remembers Shiori and recalls Aizawa saying, "It will never be enough for you. You want her to be targeted and hurt again? Think about it. How they'll see her. Do you have any idea how they're going to treat her?" Just then, Suzuki steers away from Aizawa and his car falls off the bridge. Aizawa sees Suzuki crawling out of the car as Suzuki says, "What is this pain in my back? I can't get out." Aizawa comes over and says, "Are you finally awake?" Suzuki says, seeing Aizawa, "What a relief. Congratulations on changing your mind." But instead of pulling Suzuki from the car wreck, Aizawa pulls out his cigarette box, and as he lights a cigarette, Suzuki says, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't you see all this gasoline spewing? You'll blow both of us." As Aizawa puffs away, he says, "When gasoline vaporizes, it weighs more than air. So you should better worry about the one spewing on the ground. With you laying on top of the puddle, if I were to drop this cigarette, you'll be the one to blow up. Want to see?" Suzuki says, "Is this a joke?" As if you were able to do something like that. Aizawa says, "You think I won't do it?" As Aizawa shakes the cigarette on clean ground, Suzuki says, "My bad. You win. I'm sorry." Seeing Aizawa getting closer, Suzuki says, wait, I regret it. I was a brat back then. I didn't know what I was doing. Now that I lost everything, now that I have no one, I believe I begin to understand a little how you feel. I beg you, Aizawa-sensei, I don't want to die." Aizawa recalls when he said to Suzuki when he was being targeted, "It hurts. Please, help me. I don't want to finish like this." Suzuki says, "Please, forgive me for doing all that to you. Forgive me for having been a smug brat. Forgive me. Please, let me make it up to you. Please don't finish me." Aizawa gets up and says, "I don't want to hear you anymore. You were right about something. Just like you, I don't believe in karma. All this, it's no more than the results of the actions of someone broken. Someone you broke. How many others have you left like that? Go and live. Live scared of even the shadow of someone approaching you. You don't have the slightest idea of what's awaiting for you. The true hell hasn't even started." It was graduation day over at Shiori's school. As she was walking in the hallway holding her diploma, she hears Manaka call out, "It was a blink of an eye." Shiori looks and says, "Manaka, being sentimental already?" Manaka says, "What? Well, maybe you're right. It's a bit sad to separate from friends you made here." Shiori says, "Yeah, but at least I'll be with you a little more." Manaka says, "Well, yeah, though I'll never forget the results announcement. You were so nervous you could die. My stomach hurts just from remembering it." Shiori says, "At the end, those three didn't show up." Shiori overhears a student Mida saying, "Nagumo went to the countryside, I believe." Takahashi is still living her life as a hikikomori, a person with severe social withdrawal. And Himikawa, I saw her at the convenience store before coming here. She was with some dangerous-looking people. It seems she will abandon school. Then, the main culprit will have it the best. Not so much, going by some rumors. Her parents lose their jobs, so I doubt they're doing well. They moved out of the city in just one night. Chiba says, "Woo! And she was the most arrogant one around here. Would she resist to live in poverty after all of this?" Monica asks, "Are you okay?" Shiori says, "Yeah." Monica says, "Oh, right. I think it was on the news the other day. Supposedly, this goes for all high schools in the metropolitan area. They say more security cameras will be installed, and in close collaboration with the police. They want to eradicate targeting cases entirely." Shiori says, "You know, Sensei told me something once. He said it's impossible to make targeting disappear, but what you can do is to minimize its damage. And actually, I don't think that what he did was a lost cause. All the effort he put, it won't be in vain, I swear," Monica says, and in the end he never came back. Even summer holidays ended, and we didn't see him again. Shiori says, "Yesterday I sent him an email. As always, I got no response." Monica says, "An email?" Shiori says, smiling. "Yeah, the reason he became a teacher was because, in the first place, he wanted to fight against bullies, and I believe my dad was the reason he came to think like that. All the hate he felt for him, maybe." Just then, Yumi calls. Shiori. Seeing Yumi, Shiori says, "Yumi, congratulations. I heard you were accepted in the prep school you wanted. You're amazing." Yumi says, "Thank you." Monica thinks, the local public school. Surely the rumors about Yoneda will spread in less than a day. She will have to live with people talking behind her back. She will have no choice but to accept it and keep on moving forward. Will she be able to handle that? Yumi says, "Well, I'm going." As Yumi walks a little away, Shiori calls out, "Yumi, let's live to the fullest, and let's keep on working hard on whatever we set ourselves on doing." Yumi's eyes tear up as she says, "Yes." Meanwhile, with Suzuki, he was in the hospital getting his treatment after his car accident. On the day of his discharge, the doctor says, "Mr. Suzuki, don't forget, once discharged, you'll have to keep working hard on your rehabilitation." Suzuki, now in a wheelchair, says, "Of course, I have to walk again as soon as possible and get back into society. Not just for me, but also for my daughter. She already suffered with the divorce and having to be apart from her dad." As Suzuki leaves, the doctor says to a nurse, "He was lucky. He must be happy to be here. That accident was terrible. His wounds were not severe. He got out with only a small, manageable partial paralysis." The nurse says, "Yes, he really got very lucky." On coming out, Suzuki looks at his phone, and on seeing the stocks, he says, smiling, "I'm a lucky man. When I got hospitalized, I began to invest in the stock market. I made some extremely risky investments. That made my assets grow really large. Once I'm done with the rehabilitation, I will start my own company. Everything will be for Shiori. The cost of her education will only increase from now on, and eventually they'll realize they need me more. So as time goes by, even she'll end up forgiving me." Just then, he sees he's going on a little slope, but someone takes hold of his wheelchair and stops. Suzuki says, "Thank you." On turning around, he sees it is Seiko Nomura, the one who begged for another month. Suzuki says, "Mr. Nomura, long time no see. Thanks for your help." Crap, I better put the brakes. Just then, Nomura was about to push him in front of the train. Suzuki says, "Hey, wait, it wasn't my fault your company went bankrupt. Didn't you see how much I tried to help you? I'm sorry if I said it too crude, but I had no other choice. I was just doing my job." Nomura says, "Job?" recalling when Suzuki told Nomura's daughter about him. Suzuki says, "Ah, that?" Nomura says, "Please." Meanwhile, in a bar, a teacher Fukui says, "Ah, how annoying. It's always the teachers that end up being the bad guys. Parents nowadays are more annoying than ever." Hashi says, "If you want to get better grades, then send them to a cram school." Shima says, "Don't forget we're in a private school that's below average." Fukui says, "By the way, Mita-sensei, when are you planning to eat your hot stew?" Mita says, "Thanks for the food." Fukui says, "Why did he get a full plate for himself? You know how to do it?" Fukui puts Mita's face in the soup saying, "Taste it with your face." Juba says, "Hey, don't get the table dirty." As Mita gets up covering his face and walks towards the restroom, Fukui says, "Where are you going, Mita-sensei?" Mita says, "Excuse me." Shima says, "Won't that leave scars on his face?" Fukui says, "Don't worry, it must be cold by now." As Mita enters the restroom and washes his face, he says to himself, "It won't stop? This will go on forever." Just then he hears someone say, "Everything all right?" Aizawa hands him a handkerchief saying, "Take this." As Mita was going to walk away, Aizawa says, "Excuse me, let me introduce myself. I'm Aizawa. I used to work at Ryusei School, though now I'm nothing but a retired member of the teaching staff. A pleasure, though you might not recognize me." Mita says, "How so?" "Of course I recognize you." As he takes the handkerchief, "Thank you. Aizawa-sensei, why are you here?" Aizawa says, "Drinking on my own. Once workday is over, I come here for a few drinks. By the way, are you okay? You said yes a minute ago, but I can't help to remember something I saw at school. I think it was a teacher that was being targeted." Mita says, Yes, Thank you very much for the handkerchief. Seriously, don't worry, I'm fine. As Mita comes back, he sees Fukui who says, I ordered 2 large glasses. Come on, so you cheer up, drink it in one go. As Mita's fellow teachers say, drink, drink. Other customers look on. Aizawa opens Shiori's voicemail. It's Shiori Suzuki. How have you been? As for me, tomorrow I finally graduated from high school. Now that you're free from the hate from my dad, I hope that you're searching for your happiness. I hope you're not worrying about someone else, but about yourself. I hope you can move on and find what you're looking for. Meanwhile, Aizawa says to Mita, who is about to take the irreversible step, you're wrong. You'll get nothing by doing that. Not when the culprits will stay alive and trouble-free. Aizawa thinks, I'm sorry, Shiori, but I don't think it's so bad because this is the life that I'm choosing. Aizawa offers his hand to Mita and says, come and let's talk for a moment. And here this video ends. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.